Chapter 397. A total of 4 companies of Leng Feng in addition to Wu Sheng and the other 400 people, they dug out the 9-5 spear and camouflage uniforms that they had hidden in the courtyards and began their night raid. The Leng Feng's movements were orderly and meticulous. Every Leng Feng had their own position. For example, who was in charge of dealing with the sentries, who was in charge of stopping the attack, who was in charge of seizing the city gate, who was in charge of capturing Ruhonghai, etc. All of the plans were assigned to every soldier. As a result, when it was midnight, more than 400 people walked out of the alleys and ran towards their respective targets. The Huang bandit army was caught off guard and did not expect the danger to come from within. In front of the meticulous, agile and well-armed Leng Feng, most people did not even have the ability to fight back. Among the bodyguards protecting Ruhonghai, there were a few who had decent martial arts skills. Because of their high alertness, they were the first to notice that the atmosphere was not right and sent out a warning signal. Unfortunately, there were too few such experts. Even if they sent out a warning signal, the news could not spread out of the courtyard before the Leng Feng surrounded them began to move. Battalion Commander Wu Sheng took the lead and kicked open the door with the 95 style. Soon after, a series of gunshots rang out and the 3 strong men who had a foundation in martial arts obediently lay on the ground. When the Leng Feng rushed into the bedroom in the courtyard, they pulled out the trembling Ruhonghai from under the bed. Following Ruhonghai's capture without a leader, the Huang bandit army in the city fell into chaos. At this moment, the Leng Feng hiding in the dark suddenly made their move. Along with the loud shouts from the city gate, the seemingly majestic auxiliary barracks approached. Finally, the barracks exploded. No matter what kind of army it was, once the barracks exploded, it signaled the beginning of a disaster and defeat. The soldiers fled in all directions. The soldiers did not know their generals and the generals did not know their soldiers. Once chaos erupted, it was hard for anyone to stop it. Even if the generals were to shout now, there was nothing they could do. There was no way to reverse the situation. Even the elite cold vanguard soldiers were helpless against the explosion of the camp. The only thing they could do was to observe the surroundings. Once they discovered any Huang bandits trying to rush out of the camp, they would fire a warning shot. If they couldn't stop them, they would start shooting. In short, they wouldn't allow such chaos to rush out of the camp. The explosion of the camp also indicated that the defeat of the Huang bandit army defending Gaozhou city was set in stone. At this point, Huang Yuliang's path of retreat was completely sealed. At this time, Huang Yuliang was leading 50,000 bandits and 40,000 commoners 80 miles away from Gaozhou city. In the past, with their current marching speed, they would be able to reach Gaozhou prefecture in 2 to 3 days if they were fast. Once they met up with Ruhonghai's army, they would be able to gather a large force once again. However, all of this was destroyed tonight. Huang Yuliang, who was sleeping, was also woken up by the bodyguards. What's going on? Huang Yuliang suddenly opened his eyes with a face full of fear. Young Master General Zhu reported that the scouts discovered a large number of Ming army soldiers 30 miles behind us. Furthermore, they are the most powerful Ming army soldiers wearing camouflage uniforms. The bodyguard said with a slightly hurried voice. There's such a thing? Didn't we use up a lot of their resources when they attacked the Wuzhou prefecture? Why do they still have the strength to chase after us? Huang Yuliang instinctively said this before quickly shutting his mouth. The bodyguard had already said very clearly that the Ming army soldiers that came were wearing camouflage uniforms. It was said that they were the helpers that the southern Ming Emperor Zhou Xian had invited. Since they weren't normal Ming army soldiers, this kind of army shouldn't have been exhausted. Only then would they have the strength to chase after him. After understanding this point, Huang Yuliang hurriedly put on his jacket. Before he could walk out of the tent, Zhu Fangyong, who was wearing armor, had already walked in. Young Master, there are pursuers behind us. Seems that we have been targeted. Right now we need to hurry to Gaozhou city. Is there no way to stop them? Gao Yuliang asked, thinking that he would deal with whatever came his way. It's very difficult. This army has extremely advanced firearms. They can injure our brothers from far away. I'm afraid that it will be very difficult to stop them. When he said this, Zhu Fangyong revealed a defeated expression. Even if Huang Yuliang saw this, he wouldn't doubt that he had tried his best. However, there was still no solution. If that's the case, then let's go quickly. Once we reach Gaozhou prefecture, we should be safe with the sturdy city as our cover. For the sake of his own safety, Huang Yuliang made the decision to travel through the night. Yes, this general will go and instruct the army to hurry. When Zhu Fangyong agreed, a trace of joy flashed across his eyes. Everything was just as the sixth young master had imagined. This Huang Yuliang was truly extremely afraid of death. Since this was the case, the following process would be much easier to complete. In the dark night, the army that stretched for dozens of miles set off. From time to time, all sorts of curses could be heard from the crowd. It could be seen that both the bandits and the commoners were somewhat resistant to traveling in the middle of the night. Gaozhou City. When the sun rose, the commotion in the camp was basically over. After a night of torment, the Huang bandits were also tired. In addition, they could clearly see the surroundings after the sun rose. The chaotic environment became less and less chaotic until finally, it was completely peaceful. After everything calmed down, Heavenly King Ru Honghai was escorted out of the camp by Wu Xing and Lung Feng. When they saw that their general was captured and they were completely surrounded, the Huang bandits had no choice but to surrender. The captives threw down their weapons and walked out of the camp in batches. Wu Xing's face was filled with joy. In just this battle alone, they had captured about 15,000 Huang bandits. Most of the people here were strong and healthy. One could imagine how many things they could do when they reached Ryukyu Island. However, just as a smile appeared on his face, a soldier came to report that the Shaozhou General Yu Guang, who had disappeared for a while, had returned. He was currently waiting at the government office. Oh, the speed of picking peaches is quite fast. Fine, since they want it, I'll give it to them. However, if they want to take these benefits from me, Wu Xing, then they won't be able to do so. Let's see what kind of price they can pay. There was a glimmer of light in Wu Xing's eyes. He had expected that the Southern Ming army would appear early in the morning. Even if the other party did not appear according to the sixth young master's plan, Gaozhou Prefecture would have to be handed over. However, taking the initiative to hand it over was one matter. If the other party wanted to take it back, it was another matter. If Wu Xing didn't use this opportunity to slaughter his opponent, how could he have the ability to be the commander of the main force? In front of Gaozhou City's government office, Wu Xing brought a group of Lung Feng and saw Yu Guang in armor. Yu Guang was originally riding on a tall horse, but the moment he saw Wu Xing appear, he consciously jumped off the horse and greeted him with a smile. Commander Wu, it's been hard on you. Both sides had worked together before. They had forced Sun Jianglong, one of the 4 heavenly kings, into the sea near Gaozhou City and Laizhou City. They could be considered old acquaintances. However, this time Yu Guang was here to snatch the credit. His expression was naturally a bit unnatural. Oh, isn't this General Yu Guang? A while ago I couldn't find you and thought that you had sacrificed your life for the country. Because of this, I felt really bad for a while. Now that I see that you're fine, I'm very happy. After these words were spoken, Yu Guang's face alternated between red and white. Last time, when Ru Honghai brought his army to Gaozhou City, Wu Xing directly said that he was no match for him and led his army to leave. Yu Guang didn't listen and defended the city for a day. In the end, because he didn't have enough troops, he escaped from Gaozhou City. It was after that there was a gap between the two of them. Now that Wu Xing said this to him, he was just venting his anger. Yu Guang, who knew that he was in the wrong, didn't listen to Wu Xing when they defended the city last time. Now that he wanted to take advantage of the situation, his expression was naturally very unnatural. However, when he thought about how he could take the credit for taking down Gaozhou City, it would greatly make up for the crime of losing Gaozhou City last time. He had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, Yu Guang will remember Commander Wu's concern for me. This time I still have to thank you for helping Nanming take down Gaozhou City. Oh, this isn't a big deal. If you're willing, I can give you the credit for taking down Gaozhou City and even capturing Ru Honghai alive. However, General, you should also know that many of our brothers have died in this battle. The compensation for their families cannot be neglected. Wu Xing said in an overbearing manner. When he heard that Wu Xing was willing to give him all the credit, Yu Guang had long become excited. Good. How about we go into the government office to talk? Good General, you please. Commander Wu, please. The two of them entered the Gaozhou City government office one after the other. What followed was naturally a round of bargaining. After 4 hours of negotiation, Wu Xing took away 15,000 captives and 200,000 taels of silver from Yu Guang. The amount of silver wasn't much. Furthermore, Yu Guang used his identity as a general of Nanming to borrow it from the rich gentry in Gaozhou City. Even though Ru Honghai had already entered Gaozhou City, this place had also been visited by another heavenly king, Sun Jianglong. However, as the local tyrants, which one of them wasn't a crafty rabbit with 3 burrows? Many of them had already buried the silver before the situation turned bad. It wasn't something that the Huang bandits could find in a short period of time. However, Yu Guang used his identity as a general of Nanming to negotiate with the rich gentry and quickly obtained 200,000 silver. Chapter 398. Wuxia left after getting the person and the money. At this moment he still had more important things to do. This was also the most important and final part of the plan. It was very crucial. If not for this, how could a mere 200,000 taels of silver be enough to send him off? Gaozhou City had already changed hands. Huang Yuliang was completely unaware of this matter. It was only when the sky turned dark on the second day that the scouts at the front reported back that Heavenly King Ru Honghai had been captured by the Southern Ming Empire's army. After running for an entire day and night, whether it was the generals, soldiers or commoners, they were all extremely tired. According to Huang Yuliang's thoughts, he had to get a good night's sleep no matter what. However, when this news came, he completely panicked. He who had no way out suddenly lost all hope. At this time, Zhu Fangyong also came in front of Huang Yuliang. "Young master, this matter is sudden, but we still have a way out." "What other way is there?" Hearing that there was still a way, Huang Yuliang, who had lost all hope for the future, regained a trace of vitality. "Young master, Gaozhou City has been occupied, but we still have Lizhou City. If not, we can still take a ship to the sea. Right now, the most important thing is to immediately arrange for people to scout the way. Also, arrange for people to buy ships with gold and silver. As long as we are on the sea, the Southern Ming army will not be able to do anything to us." Zhu Fangyong said. "That's right. As long as we are on the sea, the Southern Ming army will not be able to do anything to us." "Good, let's do that." Huang Yuliang had completely lost his ability to judge. He really did whatever Zhu Fangyong told him to do. He immediately ordered people to take a lot of gold and silver and prepare to transport it out. Then he arranged for 2,000 trusted soldiers to scout the way to Lizhou City and the sea. These 2,000 people were extremely trusted by Huang Yuliang. Most of them had followed his father Huang Shaoyang into the army and were the most trustworthy existences. Even when he was in trouble, he didn't send these people out. But now, in order to find a suitable escape route, he finally sent these people out. Following the departure of these 2,000 soldiers, the only ones that Huang Yuliang could truly trust or be willing to risk their lives for him were the dozens of bodyguards around him. Because of the sudden incident, the original plan of having a good night's rest was disrupted. The army had no choice but to continue on their journey. For a moment, the curses in the army grew even louder, but this was no longer a problem that Huang Yuliang was concerned about. 30 li behind the Huang bandit army, the cold vanguard army had already stopped. They began to set up camp and cook. With the speed of the Leng Feng soldiers, it was not difficult for them to catch up with the Huang bandits. However, it would be extremely difficult for him to obtain nearly 100,000 gold coins. In order to drive them into the pocket, Yang Chendong did not ask the warriors to travel through the night. Instead, he followed them at a leisurely pace. When it was time to eat, one would eat. When it was time to sleep, one would naturally need to sleep. Not only that, in the military camp, other than the necessary troops who were responsible for keeping watch at night, the other soldiers also had a party after dinner. Third Madame Shui and Miss Su Munair also offered up songs and dances. It was truly a joyous scene. In the process of chasing an opponent, it was probably rare to see an army like Yang Chendong who could be at a leisurely pace and even have a party in the military camp. From this, it could be seen that the result of this battle had probably been predicted by the youngest loyal and daring general of the Ming dynasty. Furthermore, everything was developing smoothly according to his plan. It was late at night. The soldiers who were having a party had all returned to their tents to rest. However, some of the tents were still lit. For example, in the tent that Su Munair was in, the lights were not extinguished. Not only that, but the master and servant were sitting there and chatting without any signs of sleepiness. "Miss, this imperial envoy is truly carefree. This is war, yet he is not in a hurry to travel. He even has this party that he speaks of. What is he thinking?" Servant Xiao Yun thought about how during the party, Yang Qindong was beside the bonfire and dancing with the soldiers under him. She felt that it was unbelievable. In her impression, all of the important officials were dignified and serious. They had a straight face every day as if they had the words, "Do not get close to strangers," written all over their faces. How could there be anyone like Yang Qindong who would be so close to normal soldiers? However, thinking about it from another perspective, this imperial envoy was truly too young. It was not strange for him to have such actions. However, when she thought about how this kind of person was the target of the master and servant, someone they had to kill, she couldn't help but feel a wave of self-blame and depression in her heart. In the end, Xiao Yun was still young. Although she knew what her mission was, she was still young and could easily be influenced and changed by the surrounding environment. In the beginning, she had heard that this imperial envoy was very lustful and would not shrink from any crime. Originally, there was no burden in killing this kind of person. Not to mention, once the goal was achieved, the young miss would be freed. With all these benefits, Xiao Yun agreed without much thought. However, after these days of contact, she realized that the truth was different from what she had heard. Let's just say that Yang Qindong was lustful. It had been nearly 2 months since the young miss had taken the initiative to send herself to his door, but Yang Qindong had not done anything frivolous. He even turned a blind eye to it. This was completely different from the lustful person that was said to be. Not to mention, a lustful person with Su Maner's beauty, even an ordinary man would not be able to remain indifferent. This could be seen from the cold eyes that looked at the young miss. However, Yang Qindong was able to control himself. Not only did he never show anything, but he also had very little contact. On the contrary, he took great care of them in their daily lives. In the past 2 months, Xiao Yun had come into contact with many new things such as toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, perfume, mirror, and all kinds of beautiful clothes. Yang Qindong had sent many people to deliver these things, but he did not show himself. Xiao Yun couldn't understand all of this. She couldn't understand. In fact, not only the maid Xiao Yun but even the master Su Maner could not figure it out. As the head of the courtesans by the Qinhuai River, she usually came into contact with all kinds of men. Among them, there were princes and nobles with good family backgrounds, some young masters who boasted of their talents, and some Casanova young master with rich families. But no matter what, there was something in the way these people looked at her. It was a kind of possessiveness, a kind of desire for her body. However, this kind of gaze had never appeared in Yang Qindong's eyes, so much so that Su Maner suspected whether he was a normal man. However, this kind of suspicion was completely dispelled after she came into contact with the two madams, Hu Yan and Madame Shui. Sometimes, when she went to greet them in the morning, she could clearly see the satisfaction in the eyes of the two madams. Although Su Maner was still a virgin, she had been taught about the matters between men and women by her mothers. Naturally, she could see some of these things. The spring that flashed on his face was definitely not something that could be faked. Then the question was, why did such a normal man turn a blind eye to her? Could it be that he already knew her mission to get close to him? That was even more impossible. Even if he knew everything, he should have killed her earlier. Why did he still treat her like this? Why did he give her so many good things but not touch her? What did he want? The unknown always made people uneasy. It was because she could not understand Yang Qindong's thoughts that Su Maner became even more anxious. What was worse was that she realized that she did not hate Yang Qindong. It was just like when she saw Yang Qindong singing and dancing with his soldiers during the evening party. She actually felt happy in her heart. This was not a good sign. She could only have the intention to kill her target. It was impossible for her to have the slightest bit of liking for him. Otherwise, how could she complete her mission? The servant girl Xiao Yun was still talking endlessly, but Su Maner could not listen to a single word. From time to time, Yang Qindong's figure would flash across her mind. There was a faint smile on the corner of her mouth, as if it had grown in her head. Even if she waved her hand, it would not go far away. In the tent not far away, Yang Qindong was still using his power to have women on his left and right. After sleeping together for a while, they entered a short intermission. Hiding under Yang Qindong's strong arms, Hu Yan asked with an obedient look, "Lu Lang, is the war about to end?" "Yes, the Huang bandit army is about to be destroyed. The war in Guangdong is about to end." Yang Qindong nodded and admitted. However, he only said that the war in Guangdong was about to end. He did not say that the war was about to end. This originally expressed his attitude. As Hu Yan had other thoughts, she did not think too deeply about it. Naturally, she did not understand the deeper meaning in his words. When she heard Yang Chendong say that it was really about to end, she raised her head slightly. Lulang, what do you plan to do about Miss Su's matter? She has been following us for more than a month without knowing why. What are you thinking? Yan, what do you want me to think? When Yang Chendong heard Hu Yan talk about Su Monair, he could not help but become interested and asked. I don't know. Hu Yan shook her head. She also did not know what kind of mentality she was in now. As a woman, she did not wish to share the man she liked with other women. However, Yang Chendong was so young and so capable. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was in a high position and had great power. Such a person was destined not to belong to any woman. Even ordinary people who had some ability would marry a few concubines, let alone people like Yang Chendong. Chapter 399. In Hu Yan's eyes, Lu Lang would marry a lot of concubines in the future. As the legal wife, she was also his wife. What she could do was to arrange such things. At least she could not let outsiders say that she was a jealous woman. This was also one of the responsibilities of a legal wife. It was because of this that she asked about Su Monair. Hu Yan did not know what Yang Chendong was thinking, so she naturally said that she did not know what to do. On the other side, Madame Shui, who was being hugged on the other side, said in a low voice, "Husband, sister, I think Miss Su is very good, especially her singing and dancing skills. I can't compare with her." Silly girl, there are many people who are good at singing and dancing in this world. Does it mean that they are all good people? Yang Chendong could not help laughing after hearing Madame Shui's words. No, I can feel that Miss Su is kind in nature, but I just feel that she has something on her mind. She always gives people a feeling that she is neither close nor distant. Madame Shui was afraid to leave a silly impression in Yang Chendong's eyes, so she explained in a low voice. As soon as these words were said, Yang Chendong's expression became much more serious. Even Madame Shui could feel it. It seemed that Miss Su's mind was not small. It was not good for her health if it went on like this for a long time. Should he do something? Or could it be that some things could be laid out in the open? At this moment, many plans flashed through Yang Chendong's mind. Su Monair's matter was about to be destroyed along with the Huang bandit army. It was time to solve it. On the official road from Gaozhou to Laizhou, nearly 100,000 people were walking slowly. They had not had a good rest for 2 days and 2 nights. The mental state of the whole team was depressed to a certain extent. Huang Yuliang, who was riding on the horse, looked at all this anxiously. He could not see where the bright future lay. More importantly, the 2,000 trusted subordinates he sent out had already sent back news that they had arrived at Laizhou Prefecture and discovered the presence of the Ming army. However, their numbers did not seem to be large and they might have a chance to attack the city. However, when it came to military operations, they still needed the young master to personally give the order. After all, they originally only wanted to complete the reconnaissance mission. Young master, the team's condition isn't good. Even if we reach Laizhou, I'm afraid we won't be able to complete the mission. Zhu Fangyong followed beside Huang Yuliang and said with a worried expression. General Zhu, do you have any ideas? Huang Yuliang placed his last hope on Zhu Fangyong. Young master, I have a suggestion. We should pick out some elite soldiers and arrange for them to rest. Then we should rush to Laizhou City first and attack that place. Only then will the army have a way out. Zhu Fangyong said with a serious expression, as if he was worried about the army and the people. All right, then I'll have to trouble General Zhu to lead the team. At this time, only General Zhu can do things personally to make this young master feel at ease. Nodding lightly, Huang Yuliang placed his last hope on Zhu Fangyong. The 4 heavenly kings under him had either died in battle, been captured, or disappeared. There were not many people in the army that he could truly trust. Even Zhu Fangyong could not make him completely trust him. However, at this moment Huang Yuliang did not have any other choice. He could only take a gamble. Zhu Fangyong did not immediately agree. Instead, he said with a thoughtful expression, I do not dare to disobey young master's orders. However, if we want to storm Laizhou Prefecture, I'm afraid we will need young master's 2,000 trusted soldiers. If I may be so bold, I would like to ask young master to write a letter and have those people listen to your orders. Frowning, Huang Yuliang said with some suspicion, do we really need these 2,000 trusted soldiers to act personally? Can't General Zhu take a few more people from the army to storm the city? Huang Yuliang didn't seem willing, and this was within Zhu Fangyong's expectations. Therefore, after hearing Huang Yuliang's words, Zhu Fangyong had an awkward expression on his face. Young master, as you can see, the army has been rushing through the night, and their condition is no longer the same as before. If we don't attack Lizhou City in one go, I'm afraid that the morale of the army will be shaken. If that happens, I'm afraid that the situation won't be good. Zhu Fangyong's words were very reasonable. The art of war was about winning a battle in one go. Once the battle became a battle of attrition, there would be pursuers behind and obstructions in front. The current Huang bandit army would not be able to handle it. For the sake of the big picture and his own safety, Huang Yuliang lowered his head and thought for a few breaths of time. Then he nodded and said, "Fine, since this is the case, I will hand the 2,000 men over to General Zhu. I wish you victory." "As you wish." In the following time, Huang Yuliang personally wrote a letter to Zhu Fangyong. This was equivalent to handing over the command of the 2,000 soldiers to Zhu Fangyong. Following which, Zhu Fangyong selected 3,000 strong young men from the 50,000 strong army and rushed towards the Lizhou ahead of everyone else. Young Master General Zhu left. Other than the weapons he carried with him, he did not take any gold or silver. The person in charge of watching Zhu Fangyong came to Huang Yuliang's side and reported in a small voice. "Understood." Huang Yuliang's expression clearly relaxed a lot after hearing this news. He was worried that Zhu Fangyong would think of a way to escape when he saw that the situation was not good. However, if he did not take any gold or silver with him, it was unlikely that he would not return. If this was the case, then he could relax a lot. In his heart, he prayed that Zhu Fangyong would successfully take down Lizhou City. This might be his only chance and hoped to turn things around. On the second day, the army passed through 5 miles of Gaozhou City. They could already see the tall city walls in the distance. They could also see the sun and moon banners there. However, because the difference in strength between the two sides was too great, General Yu Guang, who was guarding Gaozhou City, did not have the slightest intention of going out to fight. Close to 100,000 people successfully passed through Gaozhou City. Soon after, good news came from the front lines. The letter was personally written by Zhu Fangyong. He said that he brought people to Lizhou City in the night. After reporting to his 2,000 soldiers, he launched an attack on the city at dawn. Because the soldiers sacrificed their lives and there were not many Ming Dynasty soldiers guarding Lizhou City, the battle ended in one battle. Lizhou City was now in the hands of the Huang bandit army. Good. Seeing this news and seeing that the army had successfully passed through Gaozhou City, the tiredness of the past few days was swept away. Huang Yuliang finally saw a new hope. Pass down the order, the army will speed up. The sooner we reach Lizhou City, the better we can rest there and sleep for a few days. After the order was passed down, everyone's eyes were filled with hope. Their speed was even faster than before. After having a goal and hope, everyone's potential was also stimulated. Originally, it would have taken 3 days to complete the journey. However, on the second night, the army arrived at the Lizhou prefecture city. Looking from afar, the city gates were wide open. A group of Huang bandit army were holding torches on both sides of the city gates, welcoming the young master and the army. Good. Although Huang Yuliang was very tired at this moment, it was as if he had the final radiance of the setting sun. His face revealed an excited and relaxed expression. From afar, Zhu Fangyong and a group of followers appeared. When they were 3 steps away from Huang Yuliang, they half knelt on the ground. Then they raised their head and said, "Young master, I did not disappoint you and took down Lizhou City. Right now, the city has already prepared hot food and water. We are just waiting for the army to settle in and rest." Good. General Zhu, you have worked hard. Huang Yuliang said a few more times. Then his gaze seemed to casually fall on the welcoming army. He frowned slightly. He did not see the presence of his 2,000 soldiers. Huang Yuliang's suspicious gaze fell on Zhu Fangyong's eyes, and he also felt that something was amiss. However, before he could speak, the army behind suddenly became chaotic. Then a scout on a fast horse rushed over. Young master, something bad has happened. The Ming army behind us has suddenly increased their speed. They are now less than 10 li away from us. So fast. We need to enter the city quickly. Men, protect young master as he enters the city." Zhu Fangyong's reaction was extremely fast. He knew that the sixth young master had rushed over with his army. It was time to reel in the net. Without any explanation, he waved his arm. Behind him, people rushed past him and rushed in front of Huang Yuliang. Wait. Huang Yuliang already felt that something was wrong. However, he could not pinpoint what was wrong. Instinctively, he wanted to resist. However, he did not expect that the people who ran to his side only needed to touch his body to make him feel numb. Then he felt dizzy and fell to the ground. Fortunately, he was discovered and Zhu Fangyong's subordinates caught him in time. Using this opportunity, he shouted, "The young master has fainted from exhaustion. Everyone listen to my orders. Enter the city quickly." There were pursuers behind them. Entering the city was the safest way. There was no need for Zhu Fangyong to say anything. Everyone was already scrambling to rush into the city. At this moment, these people walked as if they were flying. How could they be tired at all? With everyone's concerted efforts, they finally entered the city when the Ming army was 2 li away from the city. The moment the heavy city gates closed, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Immediately, many people fell to the ground and slept because they were too tired and relaxed. Some of the people who were barely holding on also entered the houses allocated to them by the city and fell asleep on their beds. A total of 50,000 Huang bandits and 40,000 commoners fell asleep in the Liezhou prefecture. Just as they fell asleep outside the city, Yang Qindong led 5,000 people into the city. At the same time, the bandit leader Huang Yuliang was led to a large courtyard in the Liezhou prefecture. Chapter 400. When Huang Yuliang could not see the 2,000 soldiers he sent outside the city, he began to have doubts in his heart. It was only because of the battle report from behind that he put down his thoughts and hurried into the city. However, as soon as he entered the city and entered his large courtyard, which was also when he separated from the army, over 100 vigorous men rushed out from all over the courtyard. The dozens of guards around him were quickly killed and he was also tied up with ropes. Huang Yuliang, whose mouth was gagged and could not speak, was furious. However, with his body tied up, he could only struggle with all his might to express the dissatisfaction in his heart. All of this continued until he was sent to the magistrate's office and saw a young man sitting high above. Beside the young man was Zhu Fangyong, whom he had once given great authority to. Only then was the white cloth in his mouth taken off, and what followed was a torrent of curses. "Zhu Fangyong, this young master has treated you well. How can you do this to me?" After the white cloth was removed, Huang Yuliang's shouts could be heard. After being tortured for so long, how could he still have the strength to shout? "You have treated me well? You can ask yourself, when have you truly trusted me? Bring him in." Facing Huang Yuliang's questioning, Zhu Fangyong's expression did not change and he shouted outside. Following this shout, a man with a face full of sideburns was quickly brought in. Just like Huang Yuliang, his entire body was also tied up. Upon seeing this person, Huang Yuliang was dumbfounded. Of course, he recognized the person who was tied up. This was the assistant he had secretly arranged by Zhu Fangyong's side. He was also a spy and his name was Lu Chong. Normally, everything about Zhu Fangyong was secretly reported to him by this person. When Lu Chong appeared, Zhu Fangyong looked at Huang Yuliang and said, "Since you trust me, why did you arrange for someone to secretly monitor me? Moreover, you even ordered him to kill me on the spot if he discovered that I had any thoughts of rebelling. Can this also be called treating people well?" These words were naturally from Lu Chong. Hearing this, Huang Yuliang knew that there was no way to salvage the situation. He didn't want to dwell on this matter anymore. Instead, he changed his tune and scolded, "Zhu Fangyong, you are a despicable person who betrays his master for glory. Today you can betray me to curry favor with the Southern Ming Empire. Who knows if you will betray your current master to curry favor with someone else one day. You are such a two-faced person. You have no ruler, no father, no heaven and no earth. You deserve to be punished by everyone." This was Huang Yuliang's counterattack before his death. When he knew that the matter was over and everything was irreversible, he set up another trap before his death. He could already tell that the one in control here was not Zhu Fangyong, but the young man sitting at the head of the table. Even so, his accusation before his death would definitely be like a thorn in the young man's heart. Once there was an opportunity, today's words might become the step that would lead Zhu Fangyong to the guillotine. Zhu Fangyong understood the meaning behind Huang Yuliang's words, and his face turned ugly. Although he was ordered to go undercover this time, in order to gain Huang Yuliang's trust, he had indeed put in some effort and emotions. He had even said some overboard words. However, that was only because the situation forced him to do so. However, if someone were to repeat what he had said back then, he wouldn't be able to defend himself even if he had 100 mouths. When Huang Yuliang's expression changed, he also laughed out loud. He noticed that not only did Zhu Fangtong's expression turn ugly, but the young man sitting at the head of the table also had an unhappy expression. Did this not prove that the thorn he planted had already taken effect? Ha 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 ha. Just as Huang Yuliang's laughter sounded, another loud laugh followed, and it quickly drowned out his laughter. This voice came from Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the table. Yang Qindong's sudden laughter stopped Huang Yuliang's laughter. He looked at the young man with a puzzled expression. He couldn't understand why the other party was laughing, and he couldn't tell what was going to happen next. Ah, very good, very good. As expected of someone who could become a bandit leader. This psychological attack is indeed powerful. It's just that your calculations are wrong. Battalion Commander Zhu was originally arranged by me to be by your side. Everything he did and everything he said was approved by me. Perhaps in the process of carrying out the mission he had no choice but to use some tricks. However, that was also to better complete the plan. Now that you have been captured and kneeled in front of me, it is clear proof. Yang Qindong, who was laughing loudly, first proved Zhu Fangyong's innocence. He explained that Zhu Fangyong had become a spy completely under his orders, and everything he did was to complete the mission. With this he placed Zhu Fangyong in an extremely high position. Next, Yang Qindong continued to speak in order to prevent any future troubles. Zhu Fangyong will be the deputy commander of the Cold Vanguard 2nd Regiment, and will be awarded the rank of lieutenant colonel in recognition of his outstanding contribution in eliminating the Huang bandit army. From now on, no one is allowed to mention that Deputy Commander Zhu was a spy in the Huang bandit army. If anyone dares to disobey this order, they will be punished according to military law. Now, I will have to trouble Deputy Commander Huang to personally kill Huang Yuliang in the lobby and draw a perfect conclusion to this matter. First, he placed Zhu Fangyong in a righteous position so that he could be justified in his actions. Next, he praised and promoted him to show that he had done a good job. Next, he warned the others that this matter was over, and if anyone dared to bring up the old scores, they would be severely punished. Finally, he arranged for Zhu Fangyong to chop off Huang Yuliang's head. This way he would really be cut in half. Zhu Fangyong heard Yang Qindong's painstaking efforts and knelt on the ground with a thud. Thank you, 6th young master, for your trust. Zhu Fangyong will never be able to repay your trust even if I die 10,000 times. That's enough. From now on, you will be a high-ranking officer in the Cold Vanguard Army. Don't talk about death so casually. Beta Persei, give Deputy Commander Zhu a knife so that he won't continue to be noisy. Yang Qindong looked at Zhu Fangyong with a smile and handed over a steel knife. Holding the steel knife, Zhu Fangyong walked to Huang Yuliang, who was kneeling on the ground with a ferocious expression. Feeling the aura of death, Huang Yuliang no longer spoke as confidently as before. Instead, he peed and pooped all over the ground. General Zhu, on account of the fact that I have treated you well in the past, please plead for mercy for me. As long as you don't kill me, I will do whatever you want me to do in the future. Hey, despicable person, die. After Zhu Fangyong's loud shout, a silver light flashed and a large head was separated from his body. Fresh blood spurted out from the neck and covered Zhu Fangyong's face and body. Huang Yuliang was dead. His death represented the official end of the so-called Guangdong uprising that had caused chaos in Guangdong for nearly 2 years. It also meant that the Huang father and son had completely retired from the stage of history. Now that Huang Yuliang was dead, the next step was to deal with the entire Huang bandit army. Under the prearranged arrangements, the first thing to do was to bring out the 40,000 people from Wu State Prefecture and leave the city. They didn't even know where they were going. When they woke up from their dreams, they were led out of their homes and brought to the nearby docks. There, a large ship was already waiting for them. The ship naturally belonged to the Xianxia Navy that had been ordered by the 6th young master to carry out a mission. The leader was the Navy Division Commander and commander of the 1st Regiment. At the same time, he was also the person in charge of the Navy. He was also one of the first people to follow Yang Qindong, Gao Xiong. It had been more than 2 years since they last saw each other. Now they could finally see the glory of the sixth young master. Gao Xiong stood his ground and used his authority to take the initiative to come to Lizhou Prefecture to pick up people. Lizhou Prefecture Yamen. When Gao Xiong appeared in front of Yang Chendong, he first gave a standard military salute. Then his knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. Gao Xiong wants to meet the young master. Greetings, young master. Ah, you're already a division commander and in charge of the entire navy. I heard that in this part of the sea your name Gao Xiong is known by everyone. Even mentioning your name can stop a 3-year-old child from crying. Why are you crying now? The moment he saw Gao Xiong, Yang Chendong's heart was filled with excitement. This little pirate who wanted to find trouble with him but was subdued by him had finally become a general. It really made people sigh and feel gratified. Listening to Yang Chendong talk about his glorious deeds, Gao Xiong couldn't help but cry and smile. He said embarrassedly, "Young master, what I heard were rumors. I don't have that kind of ability. All of this was given to me by the young master. I was just following the orders of the young master." Don't be arrogant. Scud. Come get up. Tell me about the situation on Ryukyu Island and what Reiken City is like. Yang Chendong nodded with praise. Gao Xiong was originally a pirate, so he was very familiar with the sea. He was also proficient in naval warfare. He was indeed a talent. However, as the Xianxia Navy continued to expand, there were many people who came to join him every day. Although there weren't many people like him, if he wanted to find them he could always find some. But no matter how powerful those people were, it was difficult for them to be as loyal as Gao Xiong. It was this kind of loyalty that was hard to come by. The feeling of being supported and raised from a young age was not something that others could compare with. Gao Xiong, who was personally helped up by Yang Chendong, was very excited. Young master, speaking of Little Ryukyu Island, the changes are not small. The fertile land has been mined and factories have been built in the areas that can't be farmed. The city on the island has been reinforced with cement, and it's very different from before. But none of this can compare to the changes in Reiken City. That is a city that was built by the young master himself. Its old appearance has been replaced with a new one. The roads are straight, the streets are clean, and the city looks brand new. By the way, the rubber trees have been put into use. Factory manager Luan has already made the first batch of electric circuits according to your instructions. He has installed them in the Reiken Palace. When night falls, the place will be as bright as day. Every time this happens, the people of Reiken City will kneel on the ground and shout that it is a miracle. The second batch of boats carrying the rubber trees has already set off. According to factory manager Luan, it won't be long before electricity enters the homes of the people. When that time comes, Reiken City will become a city that never sleeps. Chapter 401. Gao Xiong spoke excitedly and Yang Chendong listened attentively. From time to time he would give some suggestions. Tell manager Luan that the rubber trees can also be cultivated. If the climate is suitable they will survive very well. Transporting them so far by sea is not a long-term plan. While the master and servant were chatting, the Lizhou citizens were also forcefully sent onto the ships. When they were being moved from their ancestral land, many of them had expressions of reluctance. There were even some who resisted. However, Yang Chendong believed that once they reached Ryukyu Island, they would know what a true paradise was. At that time, even if they were chased away, no one would want to leave. Moreover, before long, being able to reach Ryukyu Island would become a symbol of glory. At that time, it would be difficult for anyone to snatch such an opportunity. 40,000 civilians of Wuxia Prefecture, 50,000 civilians of Lizhou Prefecture, and 50,000 Huang bandits under strict supervision boarded the ships. They would become another batch of residents of Little Ryukyu Island, making their own contributions to the development of the island. 90,000 citizens were easier to deal with, but 50,000 Huang bandits was a headache. Although there were many young people among them, there were also some who were brave and ruthless. For this reason, Yang Chendong specially arranged for Zhu Fangyong to follow them to the island. After all, he had led them before and was familiar with their situation. However, before they boarded the ship, Yang Chendong still instructed Zhu Fangyong, "If they have a kind nature or can be changed, we can spend some effort to help them. However, if they have an impure heart, we can sentence them based on their past actions. If they have committed heinous crimes, we can kill some of them. If they haven't committed heinous crimes, we can arrange for them to serve their sentences. Isn't there always a shortage of people to build roads? We can arrange for them. Fortunately, during the last battle of Wuzhou, Zhu Fangyong had already arranged for some uncivilized people to fight against the Ming army. Both sides had suffered great losses and most of the troublemakers had been dealt with. The following work shouldn't be too difficult. Work went on in an orderly manner. In order to complete the mission, Gao Xiong had brought along 2 battalions of the Navy's Cold Front, as well as 3 auxiliary battalions. With them and the fact that most of the people being transported were civilians, there was no need to worry about their safety. It's time to solve her problem. With a sigh, Yang Chendong led Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others to the backyard of the Liezhou government office. Su Maner had just entered the city with Hu Yan and Madame Shui. She was still settling down and tidying up. Little Yun, bring a basin of clean water over. The windowsill is really too dirty. Hearing the sound of footsteps behind her, Su Maner said without turning her head. However, since she had already said that, she quickly stood there and did not move. After about 2 or 3 breaths of time, she slowly turned around with a nervous expression. You've come. Naturally, the person who came was Yang Chendong. Gao Xiong and the others were about to leave, and it was very likely that they would be busy with the matters in Yunnan. Naturally, it would not be good for Su Maner to stay in the military camp. Besides, he already had a rough idea of the other party's intentions. There were some things that should be resolved and it would not be good to drag things on. Yang Chendong saw the graceful Su Maner turn her head. She was still as stunning as ever. He couldn't help but take a few more glances and make a soft sound of agreement. Su Maner was naturally not prepared for Yang Chendong's arrival. Previously, she had heard that he had gone to busy himself with military matters. Now he had suddenly appeared in her boudoir. How could she not be shocked? She was even a bit nervous. Her gaze seemed to involuntarily glance outside. When she saw that it was still afternoon and not dark time for bedtime, she couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. She thought to herself, no matter how anxious she is, she can't possibly do anything to me right now. As a gentleman, he had to have his own demeanor. As she had not expected this, Su Maner was first nervous. However, her experience quickly took effect. Her expression started to return to normal. Her hands and feet were also very nimble as she prepared a cup of tea and brought it to Yang Chendong. Lord Imperial Envoy, please have some tea. How many times have I told you? You can call me the young master of the Yang family, or you can call me the East Marshal. Lord Imperial Envoy is an official title. It is not something a beautiful woman like you should call me. Yang Chendong's voice was still ringing in her ears. However, his hand had already pressed down on the teacup. Then his other hand seized the opportunity to grab Su Maner's jade arm and did not let go. But who would have thought that Yang Chendong had lost his usual demeanor and was actually committing lewd acts in broad daylight? Su Maner, who was completely unprepared, couldn't help but cry out in shock. Hey, East Marshal, what are you doing? What do you think I'm doing? Didn't you come to my side to serve me? Yang Chendong asked with interest. Yes. But why didn't East Marshal have any thoughts about me before? As she struggled, Su Maner also asked the question in her heart. Previously we dealt with the Huang bandit army together. How could I have such thoughts? Now that the overall situation has been decided, I naturally have to do what needs to be done. Come, beauty. At this moment, Yang Chendong had changed his usual gentle demeanor. It was as if he was a completely different person. He became impatient. Yang Chendong's change was too great. If Hu Yan and Lady Shui were here, they would definitely find it very strange. In the end, Su Maner still didn't know much about him. She thought that this was his true appearance and that she had seen through his nature. At the same time, there was a faint excitement in her heart. She had been arranged to be by Yang Chendong's side. Her purpose was to kill Yang Chendong at the last moment. At the same time, she wanted to end the southern Ming dynasty's future troubles. At the same time, she also wanted to fulfill her wish of repaying the debt of gratitude. With this thought, she had already imagined the scene of her killing Yang Chendong countless times in her mind. She had even imagined what she should do now when the other party was careless. On the surface, Su Maner appeared very nervous. However, she was very excited in her heart. She also changed her usual dignified appearance. First she revealed a fox-like smile. Then she said, Dong Shuai, don't be anxious. I'm destined to be yours. However, even if it's my first time, I have to leave a good impression. Why don't you give me some time to take a bath? This was already a form of tacit agreement. If it was any other man who heard these words, they would be overjoyed. Towards such a request there should be nothing wrong with it. However, in front of Yang Chendong he didn't act according to common sense. Instead he shook his head anxiously. There's no need to take a bath. You already smell very good. I can even smell the scent coming from your body. Why don't we go directly to the bed? As he spoke, Yang Chendong actually used a little strength and hugged Sumaner by the waist. Then he laughed loudly and walked towards the wooden bed not far away. You are really impatient. A hint of anger flashed across Sumaner's eyes. Then she regained her composure. Not only that, she even cooperated and stretched her arm backwards. Then she touched Yang Chendong's waist. She looked as if she was trying to cater to him. Pooh! Just as Yang Chendong was laughing loudly and feeling pleased with himself, the sharp hairpin suddenly pierced into his waist. On the hairpin was Sumaner's tightly clenched arm. At this moment she no longer had the expression of cater to him. Instead she was glaring angrily. Then a look of relief appeared on her face. Plop. After being pierced by the hairpin, Yang Chendong seemed to be seriously injured. His hands suddenly became weak. Then he threw Sumaner from his arms to the ground. Then he took a few steps back. You want to kill me? Why? With a face full of doubt, Yang Chendong widened his eyes. It was as if he couldn't believe what was happening in front of his eyes. There's no why. It's just because you have to die. Sumaner, who had climbed up from the ground, gritted her teeth and said. Then she laughed loudly as if she had lost her mind. I didn't expect that I would really be able to complete this mission. Mission? Who gave you this mission? Could it be Zhou Xian from Yingzhong? Yang Chendong asked with a forceful tone. When Yang Chendong asked this question, a look of surprise flashed across Sumaner's eyes. However, when she saw the hairpin in her hand, she couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. Forget it. There's poison on my hairpin. It has already entered your body. There's no saving you. Since you're going to die, why do you still need to ask so clearly? It's precisely because I'm going to die that I want to be an understanding ghost. I don't know if you can fulfill my wish. As Yang Chendong staggered, he kicked over a wooden stool as he retreated. Finally, he steadied himself. Seeing Yang Chendong in such a state, for some reason, a look of pity flashed across Sumaner's eyes. Then she slowly turned her head away. Her originally beautiful and clear eyes couldn't stop the tears from flowing down. But, crying. You still can't bear to kill me, right? You must have your reasons, right? Yang Chendong, who had noticed this scene, continued to ask questions. Don't ask anymore. You're going to die and I'm going to die too. Why do you still need to be so clear? What's the point? With tears in her eyes, Sumaner, whose voice was choked with sobs, kept shaking her head. Obviously, this was a scene that she really didn't want to face. Of course there's a point. If you have no choice but to kill me, even if I die here, I can give the order not to let others make things difficult for you. In this way, although I'm going to die, you can live. Yang Hodong's tone was weak, but he still had to get to the bottom of this. No. Sumaner, who was crying, shook her head. I have to die. From the moment I got close to you, I was already a dead person. Even if you spare me, others won't let me off either. Why? Yang Chendong was close to roaring. It was as if he had used all the strength in his body to shout this question. Chapter 402. Perhaps it was because this shout was too soul-stirring, or perhaps it was because Sumaner had too many things in her heart and wanted to find someone to confide in before she died. She said with tears in her eyes, Do you know? Just before today I thought that I could live for a while longer because it was too difficult to kill you. You weren't like other men who were greedy for my beauty. I couldn't even get close to you, so how could I kill you? So I thought that I could continue living. I even thought that there would be a day when I would have feelings for you and give up the idea of killing you. But today you finally revealed your true colors. So you must die. So you don't deserve to know the reason. Towards the end, Sumaner also used a roaring voice to reply. So you still have a good impression of me. So you already have feelings for me, right? Is there any use in saying all this now? You and I are both people who are about to die. She shook her head instinctively. But suddenly Su Maner's expression changed. She was shocked to discover that the current Yang Chendong was no longer as weak as before. On the contrary, his tone was calm. It was as if he had returned to his original expression of strategizing. At this moment Yang Chendong was also staring at Su Maner. When he saw how shocked she was, he asked, "What you meant just now was that you have feelings for me, and if I don't die, your mission won't be completed. So you don't have to die, right?" "Yes." Instinctively, Su Maner nodded. "Good. Then young master won't die. So you don't have to die either, right?" Yang Chendong also nodded. Then he picked up the wooden stool that he had kicked down and casually sat on it. At this moment he didn't look like he was seriously injured at all and was about to die. All of this fell into Su Maner's eyes, causing her to wonder if she was hallucinating. She first rubbed her eyes hard, then said, "That's impossible. My hairpin has a huge poison on it. Once it pierces into a person's body, they will be poisoned to death." "But what if it doesn't pierce into your body?" Yang Chendong answered this question as he took off the bulletproof vest he was wearing. Since he wanted to have a showdown with Su Maner and knew that she might try to kill him, how could he not be prepared? "If I don't die, does that mean that you don't have to die?" The moment Yang Chendong stood up, Su Maner had already been petrified on the spot. First, she revealed an expression of disbelief, then her eyes were empty. It was as if all the energy in her body had been sucked out at this moment. With a plop, she sat down on the wooden chair behind her. At this moment, even Su Maner herself did not know what she was thinking. Was it the feeling of her plan failed? Or was it disappointment with a hint of joy? She couldn't explain all of this clearly. All she knew was that the moment she stabbed out with the hairpin, her heart had indeed ached fiercely. Even the words she said at the end were said in an emotional state. She was afraid that she had already forgotten how many of them were from her heart, and she was even more unable to face them. Now Yang Chendong was actually fine. That meant that she hadn't completed her mission. Then she should be sad right now. But why was there a hint of joy in her heart that she couldn't explain? Su Maner sat back down on the stool. It was Yang Chendong's turn to speak with assurance. "You don't have to ask why I'm prepared. I still have many tricks up my sleeve. Otherwise I wouldn't have lived until today. I actually know some things about you long ago, so I can understand you. You must have your own difficulties. Now I'll give you a chance. Tell me everything. No matter what the reason is, I can promise that I won't kill you." Yang Chendong's words rang out in the lady's boudoir, but he didn't get any response from Su Maner. She just sat there in a daze with a dull look in her eyes. "What's wrong? Why aren't you saying anything? Didn't you say that you have a mission? What kind of mission is this?" As Yang Chendong spoke, he moved closer to Su Maner. He could feel the struggle in her heart and could also imagine the entanglement in her heart. He was a little worried that she might suddenly commit suicide. He slowly moved closer and was prepared to make a move at any time. Yang Chendong's footsteps got closer and closer. The distance of 5 to 6 steps took him 3 breaths' time. Just as he was about to rush over and grab Su Maner, the lady's sleeves suddenly trembled and a copper hairpin appeared. However, this time the hairpin that appeared did not have any intention of targeting Yang Chendong. Instead, it changed its direction and placed it on her neck. Su Maner's originally expressionless face also had a hint of blood. "Don't come over. I've let you down. I'll commit suicide in front of you. I just hope that you won't make things difficult for my maid Xiaoyun. Just pretend that I've never appeared here." "Wait." The moment Su Maner finished speaking, the hairpin had already moved towards her snow-white neck. However, at the same time Yang Chendong's shout rang out. "If you don't say anything and just die like this in order to find out the reason behind this, it's inevitable that I'll do something to your maid. So you can't die yet? At least you can't die before you tell me the reason." Yang Chendong's unconventional method of wanting to save Su Maner was a little cold-blooded, but it was still a method. However, in front of Su Maner, who was determined to die, its effect was very limited. Not only did she look as if she did not listen to him, she even said with a sorrowful expression, "Why? Don't I even have the right to choose to die?" After saying that, a look of resentment flashed across Su Maner's eyes, as if she was complaining about how unfair the heavens were to her. Since they had allowed her to be born, why did they have to torment her like this? The light that flashed across Su Maner's eyes gave Yang Chendong a bad feeling. He could seriously say that this woman really wanted to die. If that was the case, it would be difficult to move her no matter how much he said no. Then what should he do? Just as Su Maner was determined to die and Yang Chendong was at a loss of what to do, the maid Xiao Yun's shout suddenly came from outside the room. "Miss, are you inside?" Xiao Yun, who had shouted halfway, immediately stopped moving. It was obvious that Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were supposed to be outside, had stopped her. The moment the two of them made a move outside, Yang Chendong, who was inside the room, also moved. With a big stride, he crossed the distance that he would usually need to take 3 steps, and appeared beside Su Maner like a gust of wind. It was Xiao Yun's shout just now that caused Su Maner's face to become slightly absent-minded. This sudden opportunity was seized by Yang Chendong. He flew over and came to Su Maner's side, reaching out his hand to snatch the hairpin. Yang Chendong's speed was already very fast, and he had grasped the opportunity very accurately. However, it was as if there was God's will in the unseen world. Just as he reached out his hand to grab it, Su Maner reacted. Her arm suddenly fell, piercing straight towards her neck. Then, as her arm fell, a large hand pushed up and grabbed the delicate hand that was holding the hairpin. Even so, her movements were still slower by half a beat. The hairpin still left a small scratch on Su Maner's fair and flawless neck. Once the scratch was made, fresh blood flowed out of her body. The moment she felt that her neck was a little cold, Su Maner stopped struggling and allowed Yang Chendong to restrain her arm. She also allowed herself to be held in his arms. "It's useless. This hairpin is also coated with a strong poison. If it comes into contact with my body, I'll definitely die. I'm going to die." With an unknown emotion, Su Maner slowly said this. Then she raised her gaze slightly and looked at Yang Chendong's face and eyes. "I'm going to die. In the future, I won't be a threat to you. I won't be in so much pain. To me, this is already a kind of release. Release my ass." Yang Chendong, who had always given off an elegant feeling, suddenly spat out vulgarities at this moment. Then he roared loudly like a male lion, "Since you've come to my side, you're my woman. Without my consent, no one can decide whether you live or die. This includes you." "But I'm still going to die, aren't I?" Seeing that Yang Chendong was angry, a smile actually bloomed on Su Maner's face. It seemed to be a satisfied smile, but more like a happy smile. "I thought that you didn't care about me at all. I thought that I couldn't enter your eyes. But now, lying in your arms, I can clearly feel your heartbeat and breathing. I can also feel that you like me, right?" As a person who was about to die, Su Maner seemed to be able to finally free her heart. Her words were much more direct than before. "Yes, I like you. From the first time I saw you, I was mesmerized by you." Yang Chendong kept nodding and admitting his feelings. "And you also like me, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have cried just now, right?" Faced with Yang Chendong's question, Su Maner really wanted to say yes. Through these days of observation and contact, she saw all the good points of this man. He was elegant, polite, and talented. Especially his strategic attitude on the battlefield and his confidence in life with a smile. It was as if as long as he smiled, there was nothing in the world that could be difficult for him. Which young girl wouldn't like a man with such an imposing aura? Chapter 403. Other people could like Yang Chendong, but Su Maner could not. Her background meant that her right to like had long been taken away from her. All she had to do was hide the trace of murderous intent in her heart. She had been doing her best to hide her true feelings. Even until her death, Su Maner still did not dare to admit it. Faced with Yang Chendong's question, she could only force a smile. "I'm about to die. Is this still important? Your embrace is very comfortable. I want sleep. I'm already very happy to be able to slowly sleep here." After saying this, Su Maner slowly closed her eyes. At the same time, a drop of sparkling tear slid out from the corner of her eye. Perhaps this teardrop represented her last breath. Perhaps when it fell to the ground she would stop breathing. "No. You can't sleep. Someone come quickly." Yang Chendong knew that if Su Maner closed her eyes and fell asleep now, she would probably never wake up again. Hence, he wanted to stop her from closing her eyes and go to sleep. His shout rang out. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the servant girl Xiao Yun, who was carried under the blanket like a little chick, rushed into the room. When the three of them saw Yang Chendong with a dark face and carrying the crying Su Maner in his arms, they stood rooted to the ground as if they had been struck by lightning. They did not know what had happened and why they had seen such a scene. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei in particular were actually a little anxious at this moment. This was because this was the first time they had seen such a terrifying expression on the young master's face. It was as if he was going to eat a living person. Quick, go find a doctor. Find a doctor who can treat poison. Miss Su is injured. She was hurt by the poisonous hairpin. Go quickly. Yang Chendong, who was almost shouting these words, stretched out his right index finger and pointed outside the door. Oh, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei both agreed readily and turned to leave. At this moment, a weak voice sounded in their ears. Miss should be fine. Not only did Hu Mang and Yang Er, who were about to leave, stop in their tracks, but even Yang Chendong, who looked like he wanted to eat someone, and Su Maner, who was in his arms, widened their eyes at this moment. They looked at the maid Xiao Yun, who was about to be ignored. Noticing that everyone's gaze was on her, Xiao Yun felt a wave of panic in her heart. She actually lowered her head in fear under such gazes. Raise your head and repeat what you just said. Yang Chendong's voice suddenly rang out, rushing towards Xiao Yun's ears like thunder. Under such a shout, even Beta Persei, who had always had a thunderous voice, felt a sense of inferiority. However, no one cared about the volume of the voice at this time. Instead, they all looked at Xiao Yun, waiting for her answer. Xiao Yun was also frightened by the thunderous voice. She had no choice but to raise her head again. Using her still weak voice, she asked, "May I ask if the hairpin that injured the young miss is the one in your hands?" "That's right, what's wrong?" Yang Chendong instinctively responded, then asked in a deep voice. At this time he didn't notice that his usual confidence had long disappeared. Now he was just an ordinary man who was swayed by his feelings. But really is. Then there's no problem. This hairpin is not poisonous. Only that hairpin is poisonous. When she heard Yang Chendong's clear answer, Xiao Yun couldn't help but speak with joy. Not poisonous? How do you know? Yang Chendong still didn't believe her. Su Maner, who was in his arms, had a slight change in her expression, but no one paid attention to her at this time. It's like this, Xiao Yun was honest. She answered whatever Yang Chendong asked and was extremely cooperative. The hairpin that fell on the ground was given to us by someone else. It was already contaminated with a huge poison. The hairpin in your hands is slightly small, but Miss asked me to prepare it. She said that if things didn't work out, she would use this hairpin to commit suicide. But how could I let Miss die? So I agreed, but in reality I didn't put anything on it. I lied to Miss. I'm sorry. Xiao Yun told the truth intermittently. Then she lowered her head and grabbed the corner of her clothes timidly. She looked like she had accepted her punishment. Ha, good. You lied well. After Yang Chendong understood everything, he actually laughed out loud. Then he lowered his head to look at Su Maner in his arms and said with a smile, "You heard it. It's just a small external wound. This kind of wound won't kill anyone." Su Maner, who was in his arms, was blushing at this moment. The moment Xiao Yun said that she wouldn't die, she already had a faint feeling. Now that the truth was out, she didn't know if she should be resentful or glad. Thinking of how she was still hiding in Yang Chendong's arms, looking so delicate and weak, how could she not be ashamed to see others? Su Maner closed her eyes tightly, but her long eyelashes kept blinking. This meant that she was fine now, better than ever. Knowing that Su Maner was fine, Yang Chendong could finally relax and begin to resolve the matter that had happened. "Xiao Yun, you said that the hairpin with the poison was given to you by someone. Who is he?" "Xiao Yun, don't say it." Su Immerse, who was in his arms, suddenly interrupted. Then she was about to stand up with her beautiful eyes. Since she didn't kill Yang Chendong, as long as she took all the blame, it wouldn't have anything to do with anyone else. Su Maner's interruption made Yang Chendong a little angry. After turning his head to glare at her, he saw her stubborn gaze. To be able to become the top courtesan of the Qinhuai River, it wasn't just because of her beautiful appearance. Regardless of whether it was her intelligence or her methods, she was the best of the best. At this moment, even when facing Yang Chendong, she still showed a fearless expression. If one looked carefully, it was as if she was asking for death. Su Maner's fearless expression infuriated Yang Chendong. In a fit of anger, he suddenly bent down and used his mouth to block her lips. The sudden change made Su Munair, who was originally indifferent to life and death, completely petrified at this moment. She had thought of many outcomes. For example, she would be tortured severely, or she would be sugar-coated with sweet words. She had even thought of Yang Chendong throwing her back to intimidate the noble who secretly ordered her. Or she would be imprisoned forever and spend the rest of her life in darkness and so on. However, she had thought of many outcomes and methods, but she had never thought that Yang Chendong would suddenly kiss her. Moreover, it was in front of the maid, Xiao Yun, Tiger's Mane, and Beta Persei. The etiquette in ancient times was very strict. Even young men and women who liked each other had to scrupulously abide by their duties in public. Once an action like holding hands was seen by others, they would be scolded as a disgrace to culture. Not to mention such an intimate action like kissing. If it wasn't for the fact that she could clearly feel the peculiar feeling warmth, and even a hint of sweetness from Yang Chendong's lips, Su Munair wouldn't have dared to let such a thing happen before her eyes even if she was beaten to death. Su Munair completely lost her composure from this kiss. Xiao Yun, Tiger's Mane, and Beta Persei, who were watching this scene, also revealed shocked expressions. Then Tiger's Mane, who was the first to react, turned his head around. The moment Beta Persei turned around, he did not forget to carry Xiao Yun, who was also staring at this scene, over. As a result, there was another round of struggle. Oh. She did not know how long this kiss lasted. Perhaps it was only a breath, or perhaps it was 3 or 4 breaths, or 7 or 8 breaths. It was only when Su Munair felt that she was suffocating that she struggled violently. She pushed Yang Chendong's chest with both hands, wanting to separate the two of them. At this moment, Yang Chendong had completely developed the idea of conquering the other party. Since he had already started and realized that the effect was quite good, at least he was enjoying it. How could he allow the other party to push him away so easily at this moment? The moment Su Munair exerted force, he also increased his strength. He stretched out his arms and hugged her even more tightly. This kiss also deepened. Originally, it was just a kiss between the lips, not a deep one. But this time Yang Chendong even stuck out his tongue. After a series of flipping, Su Munair, who had no experience in this, was completely subdued. From the initial intense resistance, it turned into limited resistance. After that, there was no resistance, and then there was some cooperation. All of this could be said to be based on instinct. This time it took even longer. Tiger's Mane and the other two had already left at some point in time. The sky outside seemed to have darkened. A wave of pain came from her body. The two of them had completely become one. Yang Chendong had been at Miss Su's place for an entire afternoon. He did not even appear during dinner. In the backyard, after tidying up, Hu Yen and Madame Shui guessed what had happened while waiting. The two of them looked at each other, and it was hard to tell what had happened. Yang Chendong's excellence could be seen by almost everyone, and he was so young. It was a blessing to marry such a man. It was the beginning of happiness, the source of joy. However, at the same time, there were pros and cons. Marrying such a man was destined to not share alone. Hu Yen and Madame Shui were already prepared for this. When Su Munair first appeared, they already had this feeling. They just did not expect things to drag on for so long. "All right, sister, let's eat first. Your husband won't be able to come." Hu Yen smiled sweetly. She had already returned to normal. She waved her hand, and the delicacies were immediately placed on the table. Chapter 404. In Su Munair's boudoir, the food was also served. The only difference was that the woman in the room no longer had the strength to eat. At this moment she was lying in Yang Chendong's arms and being fed mouthful by mouthful. Under Yang Chendong's countless corrections and even punishments, Su Munair finally changed her way of addressing him as husband. At this moment she was using the new way of addressing him. "Husband, I still have some strength. Don't I need you to feed me? You still have strength? All right then, let's eat in a while and then go through the actions just now." Yang Chendong nodded as if he was serious and put down the bowl and chopsticks in his hands. "No, I don't have any strength left." Su Munair naturally knew what Yang Chendong was preparing to do. She was really frightened and kept shaking her head. From the afternoon until now, more than 6 hours had passed. This man was like an ox that did not know fatigue. He did not allow her to rest for even a moment. She finally understood why Sister Hu Yen and Sister Xuanyangzi usually served him together. This man really seemed to have endless strength and energy. No one would ever know what his background was. Seeing that Su Maner was begging for mercy, Yang Qindong then said with an uncomplaining expression, "Since you don't have any strength, then let your husband feed you." But you will spoil Maner like this," Su Maner said shyly, but her face was brimming with a happy smile. "I want to spoil you. You have indeed suffered too much in the years that I didn't know you. From now on, you will live the rest of your life without worrying about food and clothing. The happiness that you didn't have in the past will be given to you in double. You only need to accept it and don't reject it anymore, okay?" Yang Qindong looked into Su Maner's eyes seriously and said affectionately. There were tears in Su Maner's eyes again. She thought about her previous life. When she was young, she took refuge and had no one to rely on. When she grew up, she had to learn some skills in order to survive. In order to do better, she studied day and night. Later on, when she had a certain reputation, she had to deal with all kinds of men. Sometimes, when she met difficult customers, she would be mentally and physically exhausted. Many sleepless nights because of this. She did not even know what her future life would be like. Would she be like the other older sisters and find a rich man to marry? And then be trapped in a courtyard for the rest of his life? At that time, he was like a small boat floating on the sea, not knowing where his next destination was. Where is the hope of life? What would happen in the future? However, things were different now. She had a husband who loved her dearly. Most importantly, this man was very outstanding. He seemed to be more outstanding than all the men she had met before. Now that he was treating her so well, she really felt like she couldn't find her bearings. "Husband, can you really always treat me well like this?" Su Maner couldn't believe everything in front of her eyes. She was a little worried about her gains and losses. "Of course, I will always treat Maner well. You can rest assured." Yang Qindong chuckled. At this moment, in his eyes, the Su Maner who was bold, wise, and even tolerant had long disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a petite and lovable woman. But no matter which one it was, he liked her very much. Under Yang Qindong's service, Su Maner ate some food. When the sky was completely dark, the two of them lay on the bed again. However, this time the two of them didn't do anything. This was naturally the result of being considerate. Because of this, Su Maner, who felt that Yang Qindong's body had begun to change, said embarrassedly, "Husband, why don't you go look for Sister Hu Yan and Sister Xuanyangzi? Don't let yourself suffer because of me." "How can it be suffering? I'm willing to be with you. Moreover, this is the first night that the two of us have truly spent together. Of course, I have to accompany you." "Maner, don't be embarrassed. Why don't we talk?" Yang Qindong hugged Su Maner in his arms and said softly. Su Maner nodded lightly and moved her head closer to Yang Qindong's arms. She twisted her body slightly and felt that she was in a comfortable position. Then she opened her mouth and said, "Husband, you said that you know everything about Maner. Is that true?" "You can say that." Yang Qindong nodded. "I know that you were originally born in a big family. You have a very powerful grandfather called Su Qing. He was once the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights in the capital of Nanjing." After Yang Qindong told her everything that he knew, it was Su Maner's turn to talk. Perhaps she was unable to mention these things to others. Now that she could finally open her heart and continue talking, she might as well tell him everything. In the end, without waiting for Yang Qindong to ask, she told him the reason for staying here and the mission clearly. Su Maner's grandfather was Su Qing. When Su Qing was sentenced to death, the Su family became a thing of the past. As the only living bloodline member of the Su family, Su Maner had a wish since she was young, and that was to redress the Su family's reputation. For this goal, she was even willing to give up everything, including her body and her only life. Becoming the #1 courtesan was a method that Su Maner wanted to use to achieve her goal. She wanted to use her beauty to build a network of connections and then use those men who had taken a fancy to her to help her achieve her goal. However, as she came into contact with more and more people, her mind became more and more mature. She realized how naive her thoughts were. Those men might want to curry favor with her and even say some unrealistic sweet nothings in order to become her son-in-law. However, all of these were just words for the sake of words. When she really asked them to do it, all of them retreated. Most of the time, before Su Maner could say anything, she would just say that there was a high-ranking official in the imperial court who was spying on her. This person was also very favored by the emperor and was one of the most important officials. She didn't want to become a canary raised by this person and wanted freedom. At that time, those so-called wealthy guests would all reveal their timid faces. Sumaner was indeed very beautiful and extremely beautiful. She also had a unique and attractive temperament that made countless men unable to stop looking at her. However, this did not mean that they could really sacrifice everything, including their lives, for this woman. Putting aside whether they had the guts or not, such an important official was not someone that those young master, who only relied on their family to have a respectable status, could act brazenly. These people all retreated. They either did not want to get close to her in the future or said that they wanted to help but were unable to do so. In short, under all kinds of excuses, Sumaner was disappointed again and again. Until one day she finally saw through it. If she wanted to take revenge, it was completely useless to just look for those grand guests who liked her. Because of this, she started to feel discouraged. She even had the thought of leaving this place and finding a place where there was no one to live out her life alone. Suddenly, a group of mysterious people appeared and brought her to a completely unfamiliar place. Sumaner, who thought that she had been kidnapped, once thought of committing suicide to keep her chastity. The other party's leader suddenly said, "Do you want to die? Don't you want to take revenge for Su Qing?" With just one sentence, Sumaner's will to die disappeared. Then there was a deal to complete the mission and redress the Su family's name. Who is this person? Is it Ingzong? When Yang Qindong heard this, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Anyone who wanted to take his life would have to be prepared to be killed by him instead. No. Out of Yang Qindong's expectations, Sumaner shook her head and denied his idea. With their current relationship, Sumaner naturally would not lie to Yang Qindong. Therefore, when she said no, the sixth young master, who believed that he could see through everything, was a little surprised. Then who could it be? Could it be that it has nothing to do with Ingzong? Yang Qindong still said with some disbelief. It was not that he did not believe Sumaner, but because he believed in his own judgment. There is some connection. At least Ingzong sent someone here before. I can see that he has taken a fancy to me and wants to take me in. But ever since that person came to talk to me, the emperor did not send anyone here. I don't know if this counts as a connection. Sumaner was very smart. From this action she managed to deduce a clue related to Ingzong Zhuqian. And in that case there is indeed some connection. At least it proves that he should know about this matter. That's right, you haven't found him yet. Who is that person? I don't think his position is too low. Otherwise, you wouldn't believe that he can redress your Su family's name. Yang Qindong nodded. He agreed with Sumaner's deduction, but he was very curious about the identity of the person who took the initiative to speak up. Without making Yang Qindong wait for long, Sumaner opened her cherry lips and said, "He is Menda." Menda? Commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guards. After Yang Qindong heard the name, he immediately said this person's official position. That's right. Sumaner was not surprised at all. Yang Qindong could be so highly regarded. If he even knew about Menda, she would feel that it was strange. Menda. Commander of the Southern Ming Embroidered Uniform Guards. It was just a third-rank official position. And when this Embroidered Uniform Guards was mentioned, everyone's first reaction would probably be that they were arrogant and domineering. In reality, the Embroidered Uniform Guards did indeed have a lot of power. The Embroidered Uniform Guards wore tuxedos and had embroidered spring swords at their waists. A sentence like, "Embroidered Uniform Guards are handling a case, pedestrians should give way," would probably scare many people. But how powerful was this arrogant commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guards? First of all, in terms of official position, the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guards was only a third-rank official. His official position was not that high. However, the power of the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guards was through the roof. It was said that Zhu Yuanzhang was a pure peasant. Because his background was too lowly, he was always afraid that others would not accept him and want to rebel against him. Hence, he established the Embroidered Uniform Guards. The Embroidered Uniform Guards also became an extremely sharp sword in the hands of the emperor. The Embroidered Uniform Guards directly received orders from the emperor. Other than the emperor, they could disobey anyone else's orders. Chapter 405. The authority of the embroidered uniform guard could be said to be a combination of the Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court and the Imperial Censorate. They had their own jails, investigation, arrest and interrogation rights. They directly took orders from the emperor and could arrest anyone, including relatives of the emperor, and conduct secret interrogations. No matter if you were a prime minister or a king, as long as you were targeted by the embroidered uniform guard, they would have all sorts of methods to destroy your family. At the start of the Ming dynasty, Zhu Yuanzhang's prime minister Hu Weiyong was extremely powerful, which made Zhu Yuanzhang wary of him. And the mission of pulling out this nail fell on the shoulders of the first commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Mao Xiang. Mao Xiang, as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, was also very iron-blooded. He thoroughly investigated Hu Weiyong's case, which involved tens of thousands of people and had a huge impact. Unfortunately, after Mao Xiang completed Hu Weiyong's case, Zhu Yuanzhang killed him to appease the public. As Mao Xiang's successor, the second commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Zhou Xian, also did an earth-shattering case, which was the case of Blue Jade. Unfortunately, he followed in the footsteps of his predecessor and was executed by Zhu Yuanzhang after the Blue Jade case. The commander of the embroidered uniform guard had the North and South guards under him. The North and South guards had 5 guards under them, and the commanders were called Qianhu, Baihu, Zongqi and Xiaoqi. Normal soldiers were called lieutenants and strongmen. The embroidered uniform guard usually had around 1,000 soldiers, and at its peak there were around 60,000 of them. In the history of the Ming dynasty, the embroidered uniform guard was something that the officials of the imperial court feared. They were afraid that if they said something wrong, they would be locked up in the embroidered uniform guard's jails. The embroidered uniform guard could be said to be the emperor's killing weapon, and the birth of this organization itself was crowned with glory. To a certain extent, they represented the emperor in handling cases, and their power was evident. Furthermore, the embroidered uniform guard had a complete judicial system and intelligence system, and it was simply heaven-defying. It was because the embroidered uniform guard had too much power that it became something that some people feared. Naturally, it also became something that some people wanted. When Wang Zhen was still alive, he had stretched his hand into the embroidered uniform guard and asked them to handle many personal matters for him. Because of this organization became impure. Everyone wanted to arrange people here, and it was far less powerful than it was at the beginning of the Ming dynasty. At the very least, Yang Qindong wasn't afraid of this department. In fact, he had been an official in the Imperial Secret Service before. However, to many officials and commoners, the embroidered uniform guards were still a lofty existence. In their eyes, they were omnipotent. For example, Sumaner had always thought that the embroidered uniform guards were very powerful. Now, the commander of the brocade guards had found him and said that as long as he killed Yang Qindong at the crucial moment, he would send people to reinvestigate the Su family's case and redress their innocence. She believed him and appeared in Yang Qindong's line of sight. Hey, he's courting death. When he heard the name Menda, Yang Qindong didn't panic at all. He was even afraid. Instead, he was filled with anger and killing intent. Since this person wanted to jump out of the stage, he better not let himself touch him. Otherwise, he would definitely chop off his head and kick it like a ball. Oh right, does Guan Ying know your mission? He probably doesn't know. I told the public that I came here because I admire my husband's talent and took the initiative to come. He's only temporarily protecting me. Sumaner shook her head and explained her analysis. Hearing this, Yang Qindong nodded in agreement. Since it was a secret, the fewer people who knew, the better. It was normal for Guan Ying, who was only a 5th-rank official, to not know about this. Since Guan Ying didn't know, Kuang Yi probably didn't know either. Otherwise, he who knew how powerful he was, wouldn't send his trusted aide to send him up. Wouldn't that be handing over his weakness to others? Only a fool would do such a thing. After knowing that Kuang Yi had nothing to do with this, Yang Qindong felt a little better. If even this person who had a friendship with his father and was indebted to him for saving his life, still wanted to kill him, then he would really lose confidence in everyone in the southern Ming dynasty. Right, there was also Yingzong. Obviously, he was a little conflicted about this matter. Perhaps he was also afraid of him, which was why he chose to ignore this matter. It would be best if he killed him, but it didn't matter if he couldn't kill him. That was why he didn't appear. Otherwise, if even the emperor appeared and gave a promise, Sumaner wouldn't have waited until now to take action. She would have taken the initiative to attack long ago. After finally knowing who the mastermind was, Yang Qindong felt much more relaxed. He hugged Su Monair's body tightly. "Monair, only Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei and your maid Xiao Yun know about what happened today. Just treat everything as a dream. No one will mention what happened today in the future. You can just stay by my side with peace of mind. When the time is right, I will give you a status and marry you. How about that? As for the Su family's injustice, since you are my woman, then I am also the son-in-law of the Su family. Leave this matter to your husband. I will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation. How about that? Husband." Su Monair started crying again. She was still moved to tears. This kind of thinking of her in all aspects melted Su Monair's heart. She didn't know why, but she actually said, "Husband, you're still thinking about it, right? Why don't you let me serve you? You still have the strength," Yang Qindong said in surprise. Not long after, the sound of spring echoed in the boudoir again. Su Monair had become one of the 6th young master's women. This matter had become a secret for the time being. Only the 2 madams, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei and the first guard team knew about it. The reason why it hadn't been made public was that Yang Qindong wanted to numb his opponents. Xianxia still needed a large number of people and military strength to continue developing. Before they met the conditions, they couldn't fall out with the Ming dynasty for the time being. Because of this matter, Hu Yan and Lady Shui had both comforted Su Monair. They said that their husbands seemed to be able to go anywhere in the world, but in reality, there were too many restrictions. Even in the southern Ming dynasty's capital, there were still 2 madams. Their husband had to take care of all of this. Su Monair's matter could only be suppressed for now. This was also because Yang Qindong only told Hu Yan and Lady Shui that Su Monair was sent by the southern Ming emperor to spy on him. It was only because of love that she chose to tell him everything. He didn't say anything about Su Monair's actions because he didn't want the madams to have any knot in their hearts. Su Monair's first thought was to redress the Su family's reputation. As for other matters, she didn't care. As long as Yang Qindong treated her well, everything would be fine. Su Monair's matter had been temporarily resolved. If the Su family's matter wanted to be resolved, they needed an opportunity. They couldn't be too hasty. The first thing they had to resolve was the matter in front of them. After Lizhou Prefecture became an empty city, Yang Qindong ordered a large fire to burn down more than half of the place. To the outside world, it was said that it was done by the remnants of the Huang bandit army. This way many facts could be covered up. For example, the disappearance of a large number of people could be considered an explanation. After the fire in Lizhou, the people who should have left had to leave. On a flat beach near the sea, Yang Qindong personally sent everyone off. Among them were Su Monair and her maid, Xiao Yun. Since the Huang bandit army had been destroyed, logically speaking, Su Monair should have taken action. However, now that Yang Qindong was fine, this woman had to disappear. At the very least, she had to make sure that Menda couldn't find her. Based on the embroidered uniform guard's way of doing things, it didn't seem safe to leave her anywhere. In the end, they decided to send her to Xianxia City. In Yang Qindong's words, it was to let her go there to relax. In addition, she could better display her abilities and capture the Xianxia City military's song and dance troupe. This was an outstanding troupe that served the army. If used well, it would be of great use outside of the war. Just based on this, it was worthy of Yang Qindong's attention. To Su Monair, it was a little cruel to be separated after just being together. However, she also knew that regardless of whether it was her own matter or her husband's matter, they were all important matters. In comparison, her small matter was nothing. Su Monair agreed. She didn't cry or make a fuss. She only gave Yang Qindong a long kiss in front of Hu Yan and Lady Shui. This was also a way to declare her sovereignty, telling them that she had truly become Yang Qindong's woman. Gao Xiong and Zhu Fengyong left by boat. Yang Qindong didn't go with them to Ryukyu Island. Although he had always wanted to see the changes there, he didn't do so in the end. He knew very well that his mission hadn't been completed. Although the Huang bandit army had been eliminated, Yu Yan and Yu Lai were responsible for the Yunnan incident. Because the Great Ming dynasty was now divided into the Northern Ming dynasty and the Southern Ming dynasty, many changes had occurred that were different from history. Yang Qindong wanted to interfere in Yunnan's matter and had to do so. However, there was a big difference between being asked for help and taking the initiative to help. If he was too proactive, it would inevitably make people think that he had other thoughts. This would be extremely disadvantageous for what was to come. What he needed to do now was wait. Wait for Yingzong and the southern Ming court to be unable to hold on. Naturally, someone would come forward to ask for his help. Right now he had only sent Huang Yuliang's head to Gaozhou Prefecture. At the same time he brought more than 8,000 soldiers. After Wuxing's Cold Front Battalion and the Auxiliary Battalion were added, the group had once again expanded, and appeared here to stay. Yang Qindong brought 7,000 soldiers and stopped outside Gaozhou Prefecture. This made the original Shaozhou General Yu Guang, who was guarding this place, tremble with fear. Logically speaking, the Huang bandit army had already been destroyed. This imperial envoy's mission should have been completed. However, he still brought so many soldiers and swaggered outside the city. What was the meaning of this? What intentions did he have? Chapter 406. If it was anyone else who dared to do this, Yu Guang would still dare to bring his troops to question them, even though he didn't have many soldiers. However, when the person he was facing was Yang Qindong, he didn't have any thoughts of questioning him. Perhaps in his eyes, as long as the other party didn't find trouble with him, he would be lucky. As for questioning him, forget it. He still wanted to live for a few more days. He couldn't do anything to Yang Qindong, so Yu Guang reported the matter to Guan Ying and Ma Wei in Wuzhou. At the same time he sent over the head of the bandit leader Huang Yuliang. In Wuzhou the frontline battle report was sent down. The Huang bandit army was destroyed and the bandit leader Huang Yuliang was beheaded. All of this was placed in front of Guan Ying and Ma Wei, making them extremely excited. However, other than the excitement there was also bad news in front of them. The Duke of Loyalty Yang Qindong was leading an army of 8,000 people to rest and reorganize outside Gaozhou. This was not a normal army but a strong army that was very good at war. Facing this kind of army, even if they were given 2 or 3 times the number of soldiers, the two generals still didn't have the confidence to win. What the two of them understood even more clearly was that this so-called imperial envoy status was created to deal with the Huang bandit army. Now that the bandit threat was gone, the title of imperial envoy should also be taken back. So why didn't he leave and instead bring so many soldiers with him? Report it. Guan Ying and Ma Wei looked at each other and made the same decision. It was clear that they knew themselves. They knew that in front of Yang Qindong their ranks were not enough. Since this was the case, they could only hand over the conflict. As for what the emperor and the court decided, they only needed to obey in the future. Outside Gaozhou, Yang Qindong was indeed resting and reorganizing the army. Hundreds of thousands of Huang bandit army were destroyed. There were many people who contributed in the war, so now was the time to reward them one by one. Lung Feng contributed, so those who should be promoted were promoted, and those who should be rewarded were rewarded. Using this trip to Gaoxiong, they also brought many military medals. Now they could all be given out. After the auxiliary soldiers had performed meritorious deeds, their loyalty and culture were no longer a problem, and they were directly promoted to the Cold Vanguard. In a short period of time, the Cold Vanguard 2nd Regiment, which originally only had 1,000 people, had grown to 1,300 people. Each of the 3 battalions under his command also had 4 companies instead of 3. Don't underestimate these 300 people who had just become the Cold Vanguard. Their individual qualities were already very strong, and most of them were old auxiliary soldiers from Crimson City. Some of them had already met the requirements to enter the Cold Front, but they had not gone through the final test. Now that there was time, Yang Qindong called Kong Jia, the political commissar of the 2nd Regiment, Song Zhi, the political commissar of the Auxiliary Regiment, and some others to act as examiners and give these 300 people a chance to make a great leap. Temporary auxiliary soldiers, those who had made military contributions and had good personal military qualities, would naturally become official auxiliary soldiers. The auxiliary army also rose from the original 2,000 to 3,000. Lung Feng had 1,300 men and 3,000 auxiliary soldiers. The rest were the temporary auxiliary soldiers that had just joined the Yellow Bandits' army. They also had the largest number of people, reaching close to 4,000. More specifically, the 2nd Regiment of the Cold Vanguard had 3 battalions, each with 4 companies. Each company had 100 people, which was a total of 1,200 people. Adding on the 100 people directly under the regiment, there were a total of 1,200 people. The auxiliary army had 9 normal battalions, each with 3 companies and a company of 100 people, which was a total of 2,200 people. Adding on the 300 people directly under the regiment, there were a total of 3,000 people. The temporary auxiliary army had 10 battalions, each with 4 companies and a company of 100 people. There were a total of 40 companies, which was a total of 4,000 people. The initial 3,200 people had grown to over 8,000 people. Their overall strength had more than doubled. This was the growth rate of an army in a state of war. War was the best way for soldiers to advance, and at the same time, it was the best whetstone for an army that had been through hundreds of battles. The rest and reorganization work was still ongoing. After all, with so many new battalions and platoons, there was a need for suitable officers to take up their positions. How were these people's individual strengths? Did they have the ability to command? Were they able to unite their comrades? How was their loyalty? They had to be tested one by one. While the Yang family army was reorganizing, the southern Ming capital's royal palace in Nanjing was also bustling with activity. The chaos in Guangdong had been resolved. The Huang bandit army had been destroyed, and the head of the bandit Huang Yuliang had been beheaded. The head had already been sent to the Ministry of War for verification. Logically speaking, this should have been good news. The southern Ming dynasty had not been established for long, and its internal affairs had not been completely stabilized. However, there were 2 huge wars in succession, causing the treasury, which was not full to begin with, to become much emptier. For this matter, Empress Qian had already begun to live frugally in the imperial harem. Although the effect was not great, it represented a signal that even the imperial family was living frugally. These officials naturally had to do something, and by following their example they could save some money. With one less person on both sides, the southern Ming dynasty should be relieved. However, because of the news that Yang Qindong had stayed outside Gaozhou's prefectural city to rest and reorganize, all of the officials, including Zhou Xian, could not remain calm. If the Huang bandit army was a poisonous snake that was very clingy and could even injure people, then Yang Qindong was a fierce tiger that had come down the mountain. The danger he posed was far greater than the former. Such a ferocious tiger did not immediately return to the mountain after eliminating the poisonous snake. Instead, it stayed behind. This inevitably made people wonder if this move was an act of inviting trouble to oneself. If this troop did what Huang Yuliang did previously, it was likely that with the current military strength of the southern Ming Empire, it would be difficult to restrain them. If that was the case, wouldn't the country's foundation be shaken? Minister Kuang, although you did it out of kindness and put in a lot of effort for this matter, now that that person has come and is not leaving, how do you explain this? The first person to make things difficult for Minister Kuang Yi was the Minister of Rights, Lu Da. His brother-in-law had lost all face in Hangzhou, and at that time, it was Kuang Yi who had upheld justice. Although his brother-in-law was in the wrong and Kuang Yi had explained it afterward on the surface, Lu Da had not pursued the matter. However, could what had happened really be forgotten? He did not speak because the conditions were not right. Now that he had the opportunity, why would he be polite? The spearhead of the attack was pointed directly at him. Following Lu Da's words, Imperial Censor Shang Lu also stood up to point out Kuang Ye's faults. This subject impeaches Minister of War Kuang Yi for failing to recognize the talents of others. The officials he recommended to the Ministry of War are not qualified for their current positions. Among them are. Shang Lu opened his mouth and read out a bunch of names. Some of them were generals who had lost in the Battle of Yunnan, and some were newly promoted after the reorganization of the various guards. However, some were young generals who lacked experience. Because of the rebellion, the importance of the Ministry of War was fully displayed. As the boat rose, Kuang Ye's power also increased. Many Yamans had to obey his orders unconditionally. With more power came more responsibility. There were more things to manage and more things to do. Naturally, there were more people to offend. Originally, the existence of the 6 ministries was a place of checks and balances. Even if some departments had more power, it would be limited. However, when the Ministry of War held great power and was above the other 5 ministries, it was natural that it would arouse public anger. As the imperial censor, Shang Lu had already received a lot of criticism from officials. He did not say it before because of the two rebellions and did not have the energy to deal with internal governance. However, things were different now. The chaos in Guangdong had been resolved, which meant that there was one less hidden danger. Next, the Southern Ming Empire could put in all their effort to deal with the Yunnan disaster. Now that they saw hope, they naturally wanted to pluck the peaches and snatch the credit. In order to get what he needed, Kuang Yi had to be the first person he had to push down. Even if they could not push him down, they had to show him some power. They had to let him know that there were some people that could not be offended, and some benefits could not be obtained alone. Lu De did it out of selfishness while Shang Lu did it out of righteousness. However, no matter what, the spearhead was pointed at this old minister of war. When these words were spoken in the court, Kuang Yi held back his trembling right hand and slowly closed his eyes. There was a saying that if one did not seek death, one would not die. Similarly, if one did not do anything, there would be no problems. Kuang Yi, who wholeheartedly served the country, was close to 70 years old. He had been in charge of the Ministry of War for decades and was very proficient in this. It was because of this that he found that many people were incompetent, which greatly affected the development of the Nanming army. As such, he punished some of the generals who were paid without pay and reported fake achievements and replaced them with a group of young generals, hoping that they could change the current Nanming military affairs. This was naturally correct, but it would also affect some people who held real power. It was equivalent to touching the cake in their hands. Just ask. Which general who was paid without pay and reported fake achievements did not have anyone behind him? Even if he did not have a backer in the beginning, once he had money, he would go to the capital to find a backer and find a so-called escape route for himself. The so-called running official was not a specialty of any dynasty, but it had existed since ancient times. As such, Kuang Ye's actions were equivalent to touching a lot of benefits. Right now, only Lu Da and Shang Lu stood up. This was already giving him a lot of face. This was also because he did not go overboard when he made his move. Otherwise, according to his intentions, 80% of the generals in the various guard stations would have to be replaced. If that was the case, he would really incite public anger. This time, there would not be only two people who stood out to criticize him. Kuang Yi slowly closed his eyes. He felt some sorrow in his heart, but he quickly opened his eyes again. Then with a plop, he knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, this official is old and has been unable to sleep at night recently. I beg your Majesty to take pity on me and allow this old official to retire and return to his hometown. Chapter 407. Kuang Yi fought back against the accusation. He didn't try to explain himself, nor did he try to claim credit for himself. Instead, he simply said, I quit. I don't want to serve you anymore. Zhou Xian, who sat on the golden dragon throne, watched all of this in silence. After the Tumu incident, Zhou Xian's mind had matured greatly. At least he could see the current situation clearly. Everyone thought that Kuang Ye's behavior had been too excessive and that he had too much power. They wanted to work together to attack him. How could the emperor not know that his subordinates were divided into factions? However, most of them just turned a blind eye to it. After all, only when there was fighting could the emperor's importance be seen. Only then could he find a way to balance things out. In fact, not only the officials but even the emperor Zhou Xian had received many secret reports from the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern faction guards. Most of the reports were about who the Minister of War had met, who he had taken down, and who he had recommended. Because war was imminent, there were times when things were urgent. Usually, Kuang Yi would do things first before submitting a memorial to the emperor to explain the whole story. In a state of emergency, there was nothing wrong with doing things like this. However, once the world was at peace, if someone wanted to pursue this matter, it would be easy to catch them. Even as the emperor, Zhou Xian also resented Kuang Yi for not reporting his actions. Sometimes he would wonder if this old minister still had him, the emperor, in his eyes. This kind of official should be taught a lesson. If even the emperor thought this way, it was no wonder that Kuang Yi could only choose to retire under the criticism of everyone. He wanted to teach Kuang Yi and the other officials a lesson. In addition, the Guangdong rebellion had been resolved, and the pressure on the Ministry of War had lessened. Zhou Xian weighed the pros and cons in his mind and said, since Minister Kuang's health is not good, you should rest in the capital for a while. I will arrange for an imperial physician to treat you. As for the Ministry of War, I will leave it to the left assistant minister Wang Ji to handle. Unexpectedly, Zhou Xian agreed. He didn't make any excuses. When the other ministers saw this, some were happy, some were excited, and some were disappointed. But no matter what he thought, now that Kuang Yi had spoken, it was impossible for him to continue holding power in the Ministry of War. The only thing he could do was to kneel down and thank the emperor. Wang Ji, one of Kuang Ye's deputies, had also stepped forward to kneel and express his thanks. But in reality, the two of them had never shared the same thoughts and ideals. Even during the chaos in the south, this left assistant minister had always been a spectator, sometimes even playing some small tricks to make things difficult for this old minister, secretly stirring up trouble. This kind of person who failed to accomplish anything but was good at spoiling things often had a special characteristic, which was that he was especially good at uniting people. He was also very good at grasping the weaknesses of human nature. It was also because of this skill that he was often the roly-poly in the officialdom. He often took care of the interests and feelings of others when doing things, which also made him very popular. That was why he was able to secure the position of left assistant minister under Kuang Yi. Now that he had the chance, he really soared into the sky. With Kuang Yi recuperating and Wang Ji stepping out, the disputes in the court finally came to an end. Kuang Yi, with a lonely expression, left court early, leaving behind the other ministers to discuss the next step. Wang Ji had just taken office, so he naturally had to perform. He knelt on the ground and in a few words he found a solution to the matter ahead. Emperor, in my humble opinion, the Yunnan matter can be solved through the art of travel, Wang Ji, who had already stood up, said confidently. What is the art of traversing? Zhou Xian asked with great interest as he sat high up in his seat. In my opinion, we can first appease and reward them. Appease a land called Jiaoji. We can send envoys to contact them and recognize their position as the country's sovereign. We can use marriage to stabilize their hearts. When the time comes, as long as the Jiaoji forces retreat, the king of Minzhuang and the others will naturally be weakened, and we can defeat them in one battle. Reward them equally. We can send people to the manor of Marquis Shiping and make him the king of Mu to pacify the chaos in Yunnan and guard Yunnan for the southern Ming. With such a great favor, we don't have to worry about them not doing their best. As for the leader of the Miao tribe, Yang Wenbao, we can make him the king of Miao, a hereditary title, and make them forever loyal to the southern Ming and the emperor. As for the count of loyalty, we can send people to order them to disband their army. Otherwise, we can order the nearby cities to not provide them with food. At the same time, we can invite the count of loyalty to come to the capital to receive his reward. Without a leader, without food, the army's morale will naturally slacken. He didn't say much, but once Wang Ji's words came out, everyone in the court was shocked and their expressions changed. Since the Great Ming was established, it had always followed the policy of not marrying, not paying tribute to the emperor, and guarding the country with the death of the emperor. Other than at the beginning of the Ming dynasty, there had never been a case of a different surname being made a king. However, Wang Ji's words completely overturned everything. Being made a king and marrying for peace were things that they didn't even dare to think about in the past. Now that it was announced by this person, how could the minister's expressions not change? Not only the officials, even Zhou Xian, who was seated high above, had a drastic change in expression. This was equivalent to changing the family rules of the ancestors. He naturally understood the importance of this. Wang Ji, who gave you the guts to say such words? Do you know your crime? Zhou Xian questioned loudly with a cold expression and a hint of anger in his voice. This official is terrified. Wang Ji could see that Zhou Xian was truly angry. He knelt on the ground with a plop, but his expression didn't change much. Instead he continued, Your Majesty, to achieve great things, one doesn't bother with trifles. Think about it, the king of Yu, Go Jian, endured hardships to defeat the king of Wu, Fu Chai, and become a powerful country in the late spring and autumn period. Since ancient times, people have only looked at the results of things. Not many people pay attention to the process. Your Majesty, the matter of Yunnan is becoming more and more serious. If we don't stop it, I'm afraid it will harm the foundation of our southern Ming. Wang Ji's words were harsh to the ear. It was as if everything he did was for the sake of justice. If the emperor didn't allow it, it would be as if the emperor was muddle-headed and incompetent. Wang Ji didn't fear the emperor's might. He continued to do things his own way. On the contrary, it made the ministers sigh with admiration at his loyalty. The Great Ming and the Song dynasty also had a rule of not killing scholar officials or those who spoke out. This was the meaning of the saying, "Doctors can't be punished." Wang Ji's honest advice had happened in front of everyone's eyes. Even if Zhou Xian was furious, he couldn't punish Wang Ji in public. In his anger, he could only loudly say, "We are tired." After speaking, Zhou Xian turned and left. Chao Jixiang, who was waiting at the side, loudly shouted, "Court dismissed," and announced the end of today's court session. The court session was dismissed, but the ministers still gathered in twos and threes as they left the palace. It could be seen that Wang Ji's words today had quite a big impact on these people. Not marrying for peace and not paying tribute were very impressive. However, as an official, they didn't get any practical benefits. This was only the emperor's glory. If they could sacrifice this glory in exchange for world peace, it was probably what many people hoped for. After all, there were very few people who could put the country before their country. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many traitors in history. There were no secrets in the court session. Kuang Yi, who had just returned home, only sat down to drink a pot of tea when he heard Wang Ji's words in the court. When he heard it, he was furious. He ignored his family's objections and wanted to enter the palace to meet the emperor. However, after the steward who went to inquire about the news came back and said a few words, Kuang Yi fell back into his chair with a plop. He stared blankly ahead and didn't say anything else. "Master, we have new news." Wang Ji went to the rear court of the palace. He said that the emperor wants to meet him. Just this piece of news was enough to prove a lot of things. Although Wang Ji's words were very rebellious, not only did the emperor not punish him, he even privately met with him. This could explain a lot of things. In this matter, the emperor was not completely against it. "Your Majesty, you are disregarding the laws of your ancestors." Kuang Yi, who had recovered from his shock, suddenly roared at the sky. Then he felt his vision turn black and fainted with a plop. In the palace, Zhou Xian met Wang Ji alone. When only Zhou Xian, Wang Ji and Chao Jixiang were in the side hall, Ingzong suddenly roared with a furious expression, "Are you trying to checkmate me? How many benefits did they give you?" When Zhou Xian said these words, his eyes were filled with the desire to kill Wang Ji. This person actually dared to talk about the marriage alliance in front of all the civil and military officials in the court. There was no warning at all. This was checkmating him. Think about it, this news should be spread soon. If he didn't allow it, what would Marquis Shiping think? What would Jiaozhi think? What would Yang Wenba think? He could only push them into the arms of King Min Zhuang's faction without hesitation. If that was the case, with the current strength of the Southern Ming Empire, they had no chance of winning against these three factions. Even if they won this battle with the power of the entire nation, they would still suffer losses of 800 of their own to kill 1,000 of their enemies. At that time, if Baiming suddenly attacked them, what would they use to resist? In the end, it was all because of Yang Chendong. He changed the outcome of the Tumu Rebellion and divided the originally powerful Great Ming Empire into the north and south. Compared to pacifying the chaos in Yunnan, or even defeating Jiaozhi and quelling the rebellion, Zhou Xian wanted to kill his way back to the capital in the north and reunite the Great Ming Empire. This was the great achievement he needed. It was because of this that he wouldn't do his best to pacify the chaos in Yunnan. Wang Ji, who saw this point, stood out and proposed such an idea. Chapter 408. Your Majesty, please calm down. I have been wrongly accused. I have been thinking for the Southern Ming Empire and have not received any benefits from anyone. I only wish that one day Your Majesty can reunite the Great Ming Empire and return to its golden age. I believe that in order to achieve this goal, any price is worth it. Once Your Majesty reunifies the Great Ming Empire, you can send your army down south. At that time, you can kill whoever you want to kill and destroy whoever you want to destroy in order to restore the Great Ming Empire's prestige and prestige. At that time, the history books will definitely be written with a heavy stroke. Long live the Great Ming Empire. Wang Ji knew that his words today had touched Ingzong's bottom line. However, if he wanted to succeed, he had to do so. Kuang Ye's ability was strong, but he still couldn't do anything about the Yunnan matter. Even if the entire Southern Ming Empire mobilized troops everywhere, They could only maintain the current situation. If they wanted to win, how difficult would it be? Wang Ji knew what kind of strength he had. If even Kuang Yi could not do it, how could he do it well? Since he could not do it well, he could only think of other ways. Otherwise, not to mention becoming the Minister of War, it would be difficult to even keep his current position. In addition, he had already met with the Jiaoji envoys and said that as long as the Great Ming Empire was willing to marry the princess to King Lili of Jiaoji, they would recognize their independent status. Jiaoji would then withdraw their troops and retreat. Now that Jiaoji knew the bottom line, Wang Ji had an idea. In order to succeed in one strike, he also wanted to express his goodwill to Marquis Shiping. If he could gain the other party's favor and help, it would play a very positive role in stabilizing his position in the imperial court. It was precisely because of his previous interactions and thoughts that he dared to say those seemingly rebellious words in the imperial court today. It seemed to go against the teachings of the ancestors, but after thinking about it carefully, it was the best way to solve the problem at hand. It was just sending out a princess, recognizing a country's sovereign power, and conferring a prince with a different surname. This would be able to stop the advance of the troops in Yunnan and take the time to recuperate and prepare for the future attack on Baiming. This plan should have some hope of success. Knowing what Ying Zong wanted, Wang Ji decided to take the risk. Speaking of which, he was also forced to do so. He wanted to obtain a high position, but when it came to commanding a war, he did not have the ability to command tens of thousands of troops, so he had no choice but to use this method. Wang Ji even knew that he was the one who suggested this idea, but he didn't know how the history books would record him. But no matter what, let's first obtain the position of Minister of War. What if the Southern Ming dynasty really unified the entire Great Ming dynasty in the future? At that time, wouldn't he become a capable minister for eternity? As the saying goes, riches and honor are found in the midst of danger. This time Wang Ji could be said to have placed a heavy bet. However, whether or not things would develop as he expected, everything would depend on whether or not he could convince Zhou Xian. Wang Ji's voice still echoed in the hall. At this moment Zhou Xian did not get angry. Instead he became much quieter. The Yunnan matter was getting more and more intense. Since the beginning, more than 400,000 troops had been sent in, and it was only enough to maintain the current peaceful situation. If they wanted to achieve the final victory, they would have to send out hundreds of thousands of troops. If that was the case, wouldn't they need to mobilize more troops and spend more money? The Southern Ming dynasty's treasury was almost empty. Could they still persevere? Even if they persevered, what would they obtain after this war? If Baiming took advantage of this opportunity to invade, how should they deal with it? Could it be that he had to continue to be the ruler of a fallen country? Should he agree or not? Zhou Xian fell into a dilemma. Your Majesty, you have to make a decision quickly. The current Southern Ming dynasty cannot endure. Seeing that Zhou Xian seemed to have fallen into a dilemma, Wang Ji, who saw hope, shouted bluntly. He had the appearance of a loyal official. Say, forget it. Since this is the case, I will leave this matter to Minister Wang and Minister Chao to handle together. I can agree to their conditions, but they must also guarantee that they will help us deal with King Minzhuang. I want to quickly pacify the chaos in Yunnan. Zhou Xian knew that if this continued, it would not be a good thing for the Southern Ming dynasty. Thinking that there was no better way, he could only agree first. As for what would be recorded in the history books, as long as he recuperated and could truly unify the Great Ming dynasty, what he did today would naturally become a wise move of enduring humiliation. Your Majesty is wise. Seeing that Zhou Xian really agreed, Wang Ji kowtowed 3 times to the ground. He knew that from this moment on his position should be stable. As long as the matter of Yunnan was resolved, his position as Minister of War would be set in stone. Zhou Xian actually agreed to the request of being bestowed the title of king and a marriage alliance. He threw the ancestral teachings to the side. Once the news came out, many officials were in an uproar. Many people had tears streaming down their faces, and their faces were filled with sorrow. They finally recognized the fact that the once powerful Great Ming dynasty no longer existed. The sudden appearance of being bestowed the title of king and the marriage alliance, as well as the matter of Wang Ji going to Yunnan from Jingdou, caused everyone to overlook Yang Chendong, who was still outside Gaozhou Prefecture. Zhou Xian only took back his authority as an imperial envoy, and then had Guan Ying and Ma Wei in Wuzhou Prefecture take care of this matter. Guan Ying and Ma Wei in Wuzhou Prefecture received the imperial edict. They also learned about some of the things that had happened in Nanjing and Jingdou through some channels. How is that possible? Although Minister Qing is old, his body is still good. Now that the chaos in Guangdong has been resolved, it is time to focus on resolving the Yunnan matter. How can he be allowed to rest? Guan Ying, who received the news, had a face of disbelief and his voice was filled with anger. Ma Wei stood to the side and watched all of this happen. However, he did not say anything. In terms of rank, Ma Wei was a level 3 official, far higher than Guan Ying, who was only a level 5 official. Previously, he respected Guan Ying because he was the trusted aide of Kuang Yi, the Minister of War. In addition, Guan Ying controlled the evaluation of low-level officials and could have a say in his career. However, now that Kuang Yi was forced to stay at home, this person's right to speak was obviously gone, and he could not be respected. This could be seen from the fact that the imperial edict did not reward Guan Ying after the chaos in Guangdong had been resolved. As Kuang Yi lost power, this person was probably going to be ignored. In the officialdom, there were many people who added flowers to brocade, but few people who helped in the snow. Even if it was for his own career, Ma Wei did not dare to get too close to Guan Ying. Otherwise, if Assistant Minister Wang Ji found out, who knew if he would make things difficult for him? Guan Ying stood there and talked to himself for a while until Ma Wei was getting impatient. He could not help but walk up and say, "General Guan, the imperial edict says that we have to go outside Gaozhou Prefecture to resolve the problem of Count Zhongdan. I think we should do it sooner rather than later." Yes, the matter needs to be resolved as soon as possible. How about this, we will leave tomorrow. Guan Ying felt Ma Wei's attitude towards him. If it was not for the matter of Yang Chendong that had not been resolved, he would have already distanced himself from him. However, he himself also wanted to resolve this matter quickly and then go to the capital to see his teacher Kuang Yi. On this point, the two had the same request. Very well, then I will go back and prepare. He was afraid that Guan Ying would not go with him. If that was the case, he would not have the confidence to face Yang Chendong alone. With Guan Ying, it would be fine. If the matter was successful, he would naturally have to take credit for it. If the matter was not successful, then he could just push all the blame onto him. This was the result that Wang Ji wanted to see. How could Guan Ying not see Ma Wei's change of heart and thoughts? To be able to become the person that Kuang Yi valued and nurtured, how could he not have some ability? He was also scheming against Ma Wei. These two people who were not of the same mind worked together to complete a task, causing the matter itself to be filled with complexity and uncertainty. Not to mention the person they were facing this time was Yang Chendong. This person was extremely outstanding in all aspects. Before the matter even started, it was already destined that they would not be able to gain any benefits. The matter that happened in the capital was quickly transmitted to Yang Chendong through the Security Bureau. In the largest military tent outside of Gaozhou Prefecture, the first thing Yang Chendong did after receiving the news was to arrange for his subordinates to buy food. In the process of eliminating the Huang bandits, almost all the spoils of war were obtained by Lung Feng. The total amount was close to 10 million taels of silver. With this amount of money, it was more than enough to buy some vegetables and meat from the surrounding big families. Furthermore, the Chong clan and a few other merchants from the south who were cooperating with the Heavens Beyond Trading Company would also send food over. With these, it would not be a problem to feed the 8,000 people. Since Ying Zong wanted to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness, then he would play with these people. There were no problems with food, shelter, and transportation. Lung Feng took this opportunity to begin intense training. The main subject of this training was jungle warfare. Because of this, the few barren mountains below Gaozhou Prefecture became a restricted area. Yang Chendong and his men spent 4 days to arrange everything and choose the training area and method. At this time, Guan Ying and Ma Wei had already arrived at Gaozhou Prefecture. The two of them brought about 100 personal guards. When they appeared, they did not immediately visit Yang Chendong. Instead, they first went to Gaozhou Prefecture and found the Shao Prefecture General Yu Guang, who was temporarily in charge of the matters here. When the two of them arrived, they did not immediately visit him. This already showed their attitude. Perhaps they wanted to use this method to tell Yang Chendong that he was no longer an imperial envoy. When he did things, he had to have some sense of propriety. Don't fall out with them, it wouldn't look good for anyone. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.